Chapter 987. The black lotuses stood in the air like a city. Looking up from the dark snake valley, one could only see black lotuses. That kind of pressure was suffocating. Huh. Madam Scorpion looked up and said coldly, "Senior brother, you came so quickly. Looks like I don't have to go 10,000 miles away. I can understand everything here." Whoosh! Madam Scorpion raised her eyebrows, and her body suddenly emitted white light. At the same time, a white lotus appeared on top of her head. The white lotus soared into the sky and expanded in the wind. Boom! The black and white lotuses collided. At that moment, Sumo's expression changed slightly, because he did not expect Madam Scorpion to choose a lotus battle. Although Sumo was not a lotus warrior yet, the spell to materialize a lotus must be a top-notch lotus warrior spell. Madam Scorpion's move was equivalent to using a big move. Sumo waved her hand and directly brought Wang Yu and Shun Ming out of the dark snake valley. Because if they were a moment late, it was very likely that they would be trapped in the valley. Sumo was right, because at the same time they teleported out of the dark snake valley, the two black lotuses collided in the air. Black and white, like two different worlds. Boom! Rumble! It was a battle that even venerable realm cultivators had to avoid. In an instant, thunder rumbled and traveled 10,000 miles. The power of the black and white lotuses surged like an ocean. At that moment, it was as if an ocean exploded in the air. The world shook. Boom! Hua! The dark snake valley, which stretched for hundreds of miles, instantly collapsed. Dust and smoke rose, as if a giant dragon was rolling in the endless mountain range. Endless waves of air rushed in all directions, destroying everything in the surroundings. The powerful beings on the Five Poisons planet were all shocked, because ever since the last Holiness War, the Five Poisons planet had not had such a battle of power. 10,000 miles away, in the ancient buildings of the Five Poisons sect headquarters, a dozen powerful cultivators instantly appeared in the air. They were all elders of the Five Poisons sect, and all of them were venerable realm cultivators. Looking 10,000 miles away, their expressions changed. The black and white light covered half the sky. The surging celestial force was still spreading, and the smoke was like an ocean as it rolled over. Lotus Force. A seventh-stage venerable realm elder frowned. Is that the venerable sage's black lotus? But what was that white lotus? There is only one lotus knight in the Five Poisons world, and that was the venerable Five Poisons sage. But where did that white lotus come from? All the elders were stunned in the air. They looked at each other, but no one had an answer on their faces. However, they naturally thought of the catastrophe of the Five Poisons more than 1,000,000 years ago. Could it be that history was going to repeat itself? However, the current Five Poisons world was no longer the same as before. In this Five Poisons world, none of the dark envoys on any of the stars had the power to fight against a venerable saint. The Five Poison envoys were only at the 7th layer venerable realm. Their realms were about the same as Elder Five Poisons, so they did not have the ability to rebel. What was going on? Then they all turned their attention to the unassuming old house in the Five Poison sacred sect. They knew that the old house was the venerable sage's cultivation place. Other than the venerable sage's wife, no one was allowed to enter. It was the Five Poison sacred sect's forbidden area. Meanwhile, the black-robed cultivator in the old house raised his eyebrows and slowly stood up. Lotus Force. The black-robed cultivator's lips curled up. "Madam Scorpion, did you really become a Lotus Knight? How unexpected." Whoosh! He teleported and stood in the air above the venerable Five Poisons sage. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and his eyes were cold as he looked into the distance. However, there was a glimmer of light deep in his eyes, but it was instantly extinguished. "Greetings, venerable sage." The moment the venerable Five Poisons sage appeared, the elders all knelt down in the air. Their eyes were filled with fear and respect. They knew that the venerable sage was the most powerful venerable sage in the history of the Five Poisons sacred sect. The Five Poisons world was tightly controlled by him. The number of elders who had died in his hands was more than the number of people kneeling in the void. He killed venerable sages as if they were ants. Thus, the venerable five-poisoned sage was the god of the five poisons world, and also the demon of the five poisons world. At the same time, a burst of licentious laughter came from the air. Following the laughter, a black-robed female cultivator appeared. Her black robe was also embroidered with the five poisons pattern. The ninth stage of the venerable realm. It was a slender woman with a face like a peach blossom. Her skin was as white as snow, and her eyes were like ripples. Her long, curly hair draped over her shoulders. In between her eyebrows, there was a mark of a black lotus. The female cultivator could be said to be extremely beautiful, and within her beauty, there was a hint of seductiveness. If Madame Scorpion was as beautiful as a fairy, then this black-robed female cultivator was as beautiful as a demon. Is she back? The black-robed female cultivator stood next to the venerable five-poisoned sage. From the outside, the two of them looked like a perfect match. "Greetings, madam." The elders kowtowed to the black-robed female cultivator, because they knew that the only person in the entire five-poisoned sect who could make the venerable sage listen to them was this incomparably beautiful Madam Venerable Sage. However, this woman was as beautiful as a flower, but her heart was like a snake. She was even scarier than the venerable five-poisoned sage. Legend had it that Madam Venerable Sage ate human flesh and drank human blood. However, they had never seen it with their own eyes. "That's right. She's back." The venerable five-poisoned sage sneered. "However, she seems to be different this time. She has formed a lotus." "Oh, ha ha ha." Madam Venerable Sage laughed, then looked at the venerable five-poisoned sage meaningfully. "Why? Are you afraid? Or are you finally reluctant to part with her?" "Reluctant to part with her?" The venerable five-poisoned sage looked at Madam Venerable Sage playfully. "Why would I be reluctant to part with her? Don't you know how she's been all these years?" "But she has formed a lotus now?" Madam Venerable Sage sneered. "It seems that she has really refined the 9 Deaths rejuvenation pill, and it must be a supreme grade pill. Otherwise, she would not have formed a lotus. One must know that the 9 Deaths rejuvenation pill is a poison that causes 9 deaths. It is almost impossible for her to form a lotus. How did she do it?" "I also want to know." The venerable five-poisoned sage said, "Back then, you were the one who personally arranged the pill recipe. In these million years, she has indeed consumed a lot of energy and suffered a lot, but she has not succeeded. Perhaps someone has helped her." The venerable five-poisoned sage's eyes reflected Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming. However, he could not see through Sumo's windwheel disguise technique. However, the venerable five-poisoned sage was sure that the 3 cultivators were not the venerable five-poisoned sage. There are guests from afar on the venerable five-poisoned star. The venerable sage also saw Sumo and the others, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. "The land of the Black Lotus belongs to the king. Who dares to come and offend us? Kill without mercy." "That's right." The venerable five-poisoned sage nodded slowly, then said to the people around him, "Everyone, please follow me to eliminate the enemy and quell the chaos." "Yes." The venerable five-poisoned elders replied in unison. Whoosh! The venerable five-poisoned sage waved his long sleeves, and the venerable five-poisoned cultivators instantly disappeared. Not far away, a thin and tall cultivator in gray watched everything silently. Chapter 988. The Dark Snake Valley no longer existed. The black and white lotuses melted each other as they collided. However, the terrain within 1,000 miles had completely changed. The mountain was no longer there, only ravines. This place had completely become a battlefield created by the ripples of the lotus power. Madame Scorpion stood in the air, watching the black and white lotuses merge and disappear. Her eyes were cold. At that moment, she knew that she finally had the power to fight against her senior brother. Before the smoke had dispersed, the fighting spirit had returned. In the void, there was a fluctuation of spiritual energy. Looking again, more than a dozen cultivators appeared on the newly opened battlefield. The two people in the lead were both wearing dark gold black robes. Naturally, they were Venerable Five Poisons and his wife. Behind them were a dozen or so Five Poisons elders. Madame Scorpion knew half of them. The other half were newly selected and promoted elders. Madame Scorpion? Half of the elders frowned, because they all knew a thing or two about Madame Scorpion's past. After all, 1,000,000 years ago, Madame Scorpion had wreaked havoc in the Five Poison Sacred Sect. However, he suffered a crushing defeat in the end. Since then, Madame Scorpion had never appeared on Five Poison Star again. Who would have thought that she would return today? Lotus Realm? The elders were in disbelief. At the same time, their gazes wandered. It was because this was a matter of venerating saints. They did not know what to do. They could only watch as the two Lotus warriors fought. It wasn't that they were afraid of death, and it wasn't that they didn't care. It was just that they didn't have the ability to change anything. At this time, Venerable Five Poisons looked at Madame Scorpion and sneered. "It's been 1,000,000 years, and you're finally back?" Madame Scorpion looked at Five Poisons' supremacy with a complicated look in her eyes. Within the infinite worlds, there were some people that couldn't be seen. For example, once Vast Ocean and Nether Lord, and now Madame Scorpion and Five Poisons Lord. Senior brother, Madame Scorpion's voice trembled. For 1,000,000 years, she had hated this man. She had thought of countless reunions and then how she would make her move. However, when this man stood in front of her, her heart involuntarily sped up. The first thing she thought of was how good he used to be. It was a bone-deep feeling, even if at this moment that man was looking at her coldly. Kakik. Before Venerable Five Poisons could say anything, Madame Venerable Sage, who was beside her, laughed. "Madame Scorpion, I didn't expect that you would really return as a lotus. This senior brother is really full of tenderness. He. It seems like you've been living a good life for the past 1,000,000 years. Madame Reverend Saint mocked. "Why did you come back?" Five Poison Saint's expression did not change much as he coldly looked at Madame Scorpion. At this time, Madame Scorpion finally calmed herself down. Both of you, those who should return will return. What should be returned must be returned, and what should be reported must be reported. You should have been prepared. Naturally, I came back for revenge. Have you refined the 9 Deaths Rejuvenation Elixir?" Venerable Five Poisons asked again. "Otherwise, what does Senior Brother think? Back then, I was already a cripple. How could I still cultivate?" Madame Scorpion's lips curled up. Senior Brother's pill is truly amazing. A single pill had already helped Junior Sister reach the Lotus Realm. I really should thank Senior Brother. Although Venerable Five Poisons had guessed it before, he could not help but narrow his eyes when he heard it from Madame Scorpion himself. There was light in his eyes, but no one could see what it was. "But you only have 3 days, Madame Reverend Saint said fiercely. "Also, did they help you refine the elixir?" Madame Reverend Saint pointed at Sumo and the others with a cold and arrogant expression. Wang Yu and Xinming frowned. That was because they hated that expression. Madame Scorpion did not answer. In fact, she did not want to implicate Sumo and the others. Sumo looked at Madame Reverend Saint and smiled. However, her tone was extremely cold. "I was the one who refined the elixir. You will regret pointing your finger at me." "Regret?" Madame Reverend Saint's body moved slightly. Her smile was like a blooming flower. "On the Five Poison Star, under the illumination of the Black Lotus, you dare to say that I will regret it? Let me tell you, I have never regretted it. That's because you haven't met me." Sumo's lips twitched. At that moment, a black light flashed across Sumo's eyes. For some reason, Madame Reverend Saint suddenly felt her heart palpitate. She had never felt that before. Who was he? Madame Reverend Saint had a bad feeling, but she could not see through Sumo's disguise. Venerable Five Poisons did not pay attention to Sumo and the others. He only looked at Madame Scorpion. "If you leave now, I will spare your life," Venerable Five Poisons said slowly. His tone was still condescending, as if everything was under his control. Madame Scorpion had to listen to him. However, it was a tone that Madame Scorpion hated. Back then, Madame Scorpion had become what she was today because she was too obedient. No one wanted to be a puppet, who did not want to live for themselves. Spare my life? Madame Scorpion sneered. Senior brother, you are so merciful. However, thanks to you, I have lived for 1,000,000 years. Why would I care about a mere 3 days? You have already reached the Lotus Realm. You can create your own world. Venerable Five Poisons looked at Madame Scorpion and said in a low voice, in the world you created, you can make time last forever. 3 days is like eternity to you. At that moment, Madame Reverend Saint could not help but turn to look at Venerable Five Poisons coldly, because it was indeed a way to achieve eternity. Venerable Five Poisons actually pointed out a path to eternity for Madame Scorpion. At that moment, Sumo was also stunned. Green Snake? Madame Reverend Saint called out Venerable Five Poisons' nickname and sneered. What are you talking about? Have you forgotten who you are? Venerable Five Poisons ignored Madame Reverend Saint and looked at Madame Scorpion. Zihua, if you leave now, I will spare your life. Zihua, that was Madame Scorpion's real name. Currently, in the entire Five Poisons world, other than Venerable Five Poisons, only the Stage 8 Venerable Realm Elder behind him knew this name, because that elder was also one of the 21 people. Zihua. He. When Madame Scorpion heard this name, she could not help but laugh bitterly. Thank you, senior brother. You still remember the name Zihua? I thought that senior brother was like a devil, heartless and senseless. But how can millions of years of love and hatred be ended with just a few words from you? Today I will not leave. Either you kill me, or I kill all of you. Madame Scorpion frowned. Her attitude could not be changed. Madame Scorpion, please leave. At that moment, the Stage 8 Venerable Realm Elder walked to the front and knelt on both knees. His voice trembled as he said, the Five Poisons should not face a calamity again. If the Lotus Warriors fight, the Five Poisons world will perish. Madame Scorpion looked at the elder and lightly shook her head. She smiled bitterly. Yifu, do you really think that I should leave? I understand Madame's pain. Yifu's eyes were filled with tears. But if Madame leaves, you can protect yourself and the Five Poisons. If Madame is willing to leave, I am willing to commit suicide to relieve Madame's pain. This world is such a joke. Madame Scorpion looked at Yifu and shook her head again. Yifu, no matter when, you have never done anything wrong to me. Back then, when I was in despair, you still remembered our friendship and did not hurt me. Why are you asking me to pay with your life? Where's the justice? I don't need to protect myself, and the Five Poisons are no longer in my consideration. Today, I am just a vengeful woman. I don't care about the past and the people. Madam, Yifu still wanted to say something, but just as he opened his mouth, Madame Saint had already flown up. Her black robe was like an eagle, and the 5 fingers on her left hand pierced through Yifu's head like long hooks. Elder Yi, you talk too much. Madame Saint sneered. Red and white brain matter flowed down Yifu's face. Actually, Yifu could have dodged it, but he did not. Perhaps he wanted to die too. At the same time, he stared at Madame Scorpion and said, Madam, leave now. Saint. Boom! A black light flashed in Madame Saint's eyes, and she spread her fingers. When she looked again, Yifu's head suddenly collapsed, and his body turned into mist. A Stage 8 Venerable had been destroyed. The Five Poisons Saint's face was cold, and he did not move at all. Chapter 989. An 8th-stage Venerable was killed in the blink of an eye. Even Sumo did not expect that. The Saint Madame was indeed ruthless. At the same time, Madame Scorpion made her move. After all, she had 2 enemies. Madame Venerable Saint was her target. That woman used to be her nightmare. Whoosh! Madame Scorpion waved her sleeves and charged at Madame Venerable Saint. Her sleeves contained the power of the Lotus Realm. A ray of yellow light pierced through the air. The elders of the Five Poisons divine sect were startled. They quickly retreated. They did not want to bear the aftermath of the attack. In a battle of Lotus warriors, unless one was a special venerable, one would not be able to advance. However, the Saint Madame looked at Madame Scorpion coldly and did not move. She did not dodge, nor did she cast any spells. That was because someone was attacking on her behalf. Just as Madame Scorpion made her move, Five Poisons' divine sect also made his move. He waved his sleeves as well. A ray of black light pierced through the sky and met Madame Scorpion. Boom! Crack! The entire sky seemed to be shaking. It was as if the sky was going to split open. Two long sleeves collided, creating a huge shockwave that spread in all directions. The smoke that had just dissipated came back again. Luckily, the area within a 1,000-mile radius was already in ruins. The shockwave soared up into the sky. In the sky, Madame Scorpion and Five Poisons' divine sect looked at each other from afar. Madame Scorpion's yellow dress fluttered in the wind, while Five Poisons' divine sect's black robe fluttered in the wind. They were like the two gods of this world. However, Madame Venerable Saint was standing next to Five Poisons' divine sect. Her lips curled into a cold smile as she looked at Madame Scorpion with an extremely arrogant look. It was the attitude of a victor. At that moment, Sumo, who was watching the battle from behind, raised her brows. He finally understood why the Saint Madame had killed the 8th-stage Venerable Realm Elder without any hesitation, and why she did not attack Madame Scorpion. It was not only because the Venerable Saint talked too much, but also because he wanted to force Five Poisons' divine sect to attack. That was the best way to provoke Madame Scorpion. Women always knew how to make use of other women. Madame Scorpion raised her brows and said coldly, "Senior Green Snake, you are still the same." Who? After saying that, Madame Scorpion did not say anything else and raised her hands. The lotus energy was like the wind, whistling as it rose. In an instant, tens of thousands of spiritual scorpions appeared behind her. They were so dense that they blotted out the sky and covered the earth like locusts. With an endless sound of breaking through the air, they swept towards Venerable Five Poisons and Madame Venerable Holy like a storm. This was an indiscriminate spell technique, and everything within a radius of several dozen kilometers was enveloped by it. If a mortal saw such a scene, they would probably be scared to death. Who had ever seen a scorpion flying in the sky? At that moment, Venerable Five Poisons did not say anything. Instead, he spread his arms wide. His movements were almost exactly the same as Madame Scorpion. That was because they were disciples of the same master. He knew this Tao technique as well, but what flew out from his back were green snakes. Chi-chi-chi, chi-chi. The green snakes were like tens of thousands of arrows, each with a long tongue sticking out. It was an extremely spectacular scene, and also an extremely frightening one. Many of the Five Poisons elders present had not seen a venerable sage in action for a long time. A poisonous scorpion against a poisonous snake. Every scorpion and snake was attached to the lotus power. Boom! Ka! Boom! In the sky, fireworks suddenly exploded. It was incomparably dazzling. At that moment, the originally dim sky of the Five Poisons world suddenly lit up. However, those were the fireworks of death. Countless poisonous scorpions and green snakes collided and exploded. A lifetime of slaughter, a death of a firework. The poisonous scorpions and green snakes were like Madame Scorpion and Venerable Five Poisons avatars, biting and clashing. When the poisonous scorpions and green snakes collided, neither of them made a move. Madame Scorpion watched all of this. Her eyes reflected the endless fireworks. She had seen this scene before in the past. However, what they used back then were all illusions. Childhood sweethearts, the past was like smoke. Now it was a battle of life and death. Venerable Five Poisons' expression was cold. There was no sadness or joy in his eyes. His eyes seemed to represent nothing, but at the same time, it seemed to represent everything. Chi-chi, chi-chi. In the air, the poisonous scorpions and green snakes were almost completely exhausted. Madame Scorpion and Venerable Five Poisons faced each other, but they seemed to be separated by a world. As the poisonous scorpions and green snakes disappeared, the back of Madame Scorpion and Venerable Five Poisons rose to the sky. The light was so bright that it seemed like the sky behind them was hanging down from the sky. The Five Poisons' elders' eyes were tightly locked. Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shunming's expressions were also solemn. In this battle, the two's realm and aura were equally matched. It seemed like it would be difficult to determine the winner. Love and hate, life and death. Madame Scorpion's gaze gradually became cold. Looking again, she stretched her hand to her back and slowly pulled out a long black whip from her back. That long whip seemed to have been hidden in her body. It was a long whip that looked like a scorpion's tail. It emitted a faint black light, and within the black light, there was a faint blue light. It was a lianbua, blue scorpion, God's whip. The elders of the five poison holy sect couldn't help exchanging glances with each other, their expressions instantly changing. There were only two lianbua in the entire five poison sect. The blue scorpion God's whip was one of them. Legend had it that it was formed from the body of the first dark scorpion emissary who sacrificed himself. However, this whip had been lost for millions of years, and no one knew where it went. That year, even in the last Holiness War, this lianbua did not appear. Who would have thought that it would be in Madame Scorpion's hands? Green Snake, what is going on? Madame Saint narrowed her eyes and looked at Five Poisons Saint coldly. Why is this lianbua in her hands? You ask me, but who should I ask? Five Poisons Saint's tone was calm. You? The black lotus on Madame Saint's forehead suddenly lit up, but disappeared in a flash. Then, the corner of her mouth curled up, and she sneered. Green Snake, no matter what, I will kill her today. You have one more chance. Five Poisons Saint ignored her, and looked at Madame Scorpion, and said in a deep voice, Zihua, leave now, and I will spare your life. This was the third time Five Poisons Saint said this. However, when Madame Scorpion heard this, she shook her head and sneered. The blue scorpion God's whip in her hand danced above her head. At this moment, half of the blue scorpion God's whip was black, and the other half was blue. Her lotus power had already been poured into it. At this moment, one whip from her could destroy a world. Senior brother, everything is impossible. Madame Scorpion looked at Five Poisons Saint, and her eyes had a trace of gentleness that could not be erased. Today, there will be no other result. Either you die, or I die. Everything had been confirmed from the very beginning. It will not change. Ha ha ha. Hearing this, Madame Reverend Sage could not help but raise her head and laugh. Green Snake, your 3 chances are gone. She did not leave. Today, in the name of the Black Lotus, I will let you quell this chaos. Wherever the Black Lotus is, those who do not submit will be killed. Otherworldly beings annihilated. Five Poisons Saint did not speak, but his eyes suddenly lit up and then were swallowed by the darkness. Whoosh, whoosh. Looking again, black waves suddenly surged under Five Poisons Saint's feet. The waves spread out like clouds devouring the sky. In an instant, the weather changed and the world changed. A black lotus appeared under Five Poisons Saint's feet. At the same time, a black lotus appeared under Madame Saint's feet. 2 lotuses were born simultaneously. Sumo's eyes focused. Then his green robe gradually turned white. Chapter 990. When the black lotuses appeared, heaven and earth changed color. At that moment, if a cultivator looked at the Five Poison Star from all over the universe, they would see 2 black clouds rising from the 2 poles of the Five Poison Star. From the north and south, they rapidly spread towards the center of the Five Poison Star. At this moment, the center of the Five Poison Star was the 2 black lotuses. The entire Five Poison Star was turning black. 2 saints in 1 star. It was a rare sight, but it happened on the Five Poison Star. Now, the leader of the Five Poison Star was not Five Poison Sage alone, but 2. 2 black lotuses were born from the same stem. Endless black light flowed between the 2 black lotuses. At this moment, Madame Scorpion's eyes were slightly red, because the one born from the same stem as the green snake should have been her. But at this moment, she did not want to say anything. She had no more tears, because her tears were all gone. She had no more hatred, because hatred could not represent the pain in her heart. Crackle, crackle, the blue scorpion god's whip floated above his head like a wave. Countless blue arcs of lightning exploded in the black light, like stars in the night sky. At the same time, a white lotus appeared under her feet. It was a lotus that belonged to her. The white and black lotuses appeared at the same time. But this time, she was fighting one against two. Green snake, make your move. What are you waiting for? The black lotus mark between Madame Venerable Saint's eyebrows suddenly lit up like a jumping black flame. Whoosh! Just as she finished speaking, 5 poison sage had already flown up. He was like a black eagle that had hibernated for a long time, finally swooping down. The black lotuses swayed. Endless lotus power filled the air. The elders of the 5 poison sect retreated again. Forbidden light appeared under Wang Yu and Shun Ming's feet. Sumo's clothes had already turned completely white. The aura on his body was rising. At this moment, 5 poison sage had already formed a seal. He formed a seal with both hands, and a black hole suddenly appeared in the air. Inside the black hole, a pitch-black giant python with golden patterns appeared. The python was several hundred zhang long, and its waist was several zhang long. The huge creature opened its eyes, spitting out its long tongue as it headed straight for Madame Scorpion. Heaven-devouring divine python. That was Venerable 5 Poison's spiritual divine beast. This beast normally hibernated in the dark spring of the 5 Poison Sacred Hall and did not appear in the world at all. It could absorb the power of the entire 5 Poison Star. The last time it appeared was during the battle for supremacy. At that time, the 5 Poison Saint commanded the sky-devouring divine python to directly devour 3 5 Poisons Saint sect elders. The sky-devouring divine python became famous in one battle. From then on, Elder 5 Poison's expression changed at the mention of the sky-devouring divine python. It was known as the #1 divine beast in the 5 Poisons realm. Its battle prowess was not something the Dark Spirit Scorpion King could compare to. Ordinary 9th stage, Venerable Realm cultivators were no match for it. The fact that 5 Poison Saint had summoned the sky-devouring divine python was enough to show that he was serious. After all, it was one of the 5 Poison Saint's most important fighting techniques. Ha ha! The Saint Madam watched from the side and couldn't help but smile. At that moment, she was very satisfied with Venerable 5 Poison's performance. The heaven-devouring divine python could really devour the heavens. At this moment, it opened its huge mouth, and an endless suction force lifted up endless sand and stones, like a flood. At that moment, it opened its giant mouth, and a boundless suction force swept up endless sand and pebbles. Venerable 5 Poisons stood on top of the giant python and looked at Madame Scorpion coldly. At this moment, she finally found the calmest state of mind, the state of mind for battle. At that moment, she finally found the calmest state of mind, the state of mind to fight. Pythoner, long time no see. Madame Scorpion smiled calmly. This sky-devouring divine python had been subdued by Green Snake since it was young. In other words, Green Snake and Zihua's growth was accompanied by the sky-devouring divine python's growth. They were all playmates. At that moment, the sky-devouring divine python's eyes were like stars, emitting a cold glint. However, when it saw that it was Madame Scorpion, it was startled. This was because the female cultivator in front of it was half its master. What's going on? This is not a game. This is a battle of life and death. Heartless humans, but sentimental beasts. The sky-devouring divine python was initially charging at Madame Scorpion. However, when it got close to Madame Scorpion, it suddenly raised its head and leaped into the sky, directly passing by her. For the first time, it instinctively did not attack Madame Scorpion, because in its opinion, its master must have made a mistake. Why would its master kill her? Hee. Madame Scorpion shook her head and smiled bitterly. Sometimes humans are really inferior to beasts. Actually, Madame Scorpion knew that the sky-devouring divine python would attack her soon. After all, the sky-devouring divine python's true master was 5 Poison Saint, and the sky-devouring divine python had a blood sacrifice contract with 5 Poison Saint. It had to obey the summons and orders of its master. However, this was enough. Madame Scorpion looked at the sky-devouring divine python and smiled lightly. Pythoner, thank you. However, I will still kill you in a while, because we will all die. In 3 days, we will meet again. Whoosh, whoosh. Just as Madame Scorpion finished speaking, the sky-devouring divine python had already turned around. It stirred up an even bigger storm. 5 poison, Saint pressed his hand on its head and gave it the most direct order. Kill. The sky-devouring divine python was a beast after all. It could not fully understand the complex emotions of humans. It could only carry out orders. From a certain point of view, it was a puppet. Therefore, this time, it opened its huge mouth and its teeth were like swords, biting towards Madame Scorpion. Madame Scorpion's eyes flashed with sorrow, because she was inferior to a beast. Previously, the sky-devouring divine python did not attack her, so she could only choose to kill it. Otherwise, it would become an obstacle for her to kill 5 poison saint. Humans were often crueler than beasts. Crackle, boom, lightning flashed and thunder roared. The blue scorpion divine whip suddenly curled in the air like a black and blue lightning. It rolled unceasingly. It was truly a power that could destroy heaven and earth. At this moment, the entire 5 poison planet lit up with countless lightning bolts. This planet was heading towards an endless calamity. Everyone understood that a Lotus warrior with Lianbois was enough to destroy the entire 5 poison planet. However, this time, Madame Scorpion only wanted to kill the sky-devouring divine python. As the sky-devouring divine python attacked, Madame Scorpion's body suddenly fell down. At the same time, she flicked her wrist. The blue scorpion divine whip slightly raised. The head of the blue scorpion divine whip was originally a stinger, but now it was like a sharp sword. Pow! Chi! The stinger directly pierced through the sky-devouring divine python's lower jaw. The blue scorpion divine whip was poisonous, but that poison was ineffective against the sky-devouring divine python. However, it was extremely sharp. Looking again, Madame Scorpion's face turned cold. The long whip in her hand instantly straightened. Then, she directly flew past the sky-devouring divine python in the opposite direction. Chi! Chi! Hua! The air was filled with arcs of lightning. A bolt of lightning, like a swimming dragon, streaked across the sky. That scene was extremely beautiful. Alas, the sky-devouring divine python's stomach was directly split open. That sky-devouring divine python was a divine beast that had cultivated for millions of years. There was no howl, only endless divine light spread out. At the same time, the countless divine lights instantly turned into sparkling stars. Sparkling and translucent, endlessly resplendent. That was the end of a powerful life form. The elders of the 5 poison saint clan all paled. That was the power of a Lotus warrior. The sky-devouring divine python was comparable to a 9th level venerable, but in just one round, it was slaughtered by Madame Scorpion, clean and efficient as if it was light. If they went over, it would be suicide. And the death of the sky-devouring divine python made Madame Scorpion's heart even colder. In the past, everything could be killed. Chapter 991. Perhaps everyone had killing intent in their heart, but they hid it normally. When you personally destroyed something that you once cherished, this killing intent would be triggered. Nothing else mattered. Thus, after personally killing the heaven-devouring god python, Madame Scorpion's brows slightly narrowed. Whether it was her eyes or her heart, they were filled with killing intent. In the void, Madame Scorpion suddenly turned around. The blue scorpion divine whip in her hand suddenly shook, becoming as straight as a spear. Chi! The sound of the air being pierced rang out. Endless blue light appeared in front of the divine whip, piercing towards 5 poisons. Madame Scorpion's move was as fast as lightning. At that moment, all sorts of past events surfaced in her mind. She remembered the endless torture that 5 poisons had inflicted on her, the dark days on the immortal Scorpion Star. She crawled in the black pond, living day and night with the poisonous scorpions and stench. She desired revenge so much that it was the only meaning of her life. Actually, she had asked countless times, why did senior brother treat her like that? Why did he torture her like that? Why did their love vanish into thin air without a trace? However, all those questions have been erased by time. It was not relief, but numbness. Some questions no longer needed an answer. At that moment, hatred and anger overflowed. It was the accumulation of millions of years. The white lotus under Madame Scorpion's feet started to spin, rays of white light forming a gust of wind. It was the majestic power of the lotus. Whoosh! Following the blue scorpion divine whip, Madame Scorpion's entire body charged towards 5 poisons like a falling star. The heaven-devouring god Python's starlight dissipated. Venerable 5 Poison's expression did not change much. His face was still devoid of joy or sadness. Actually, it was hard to tell if he was emotionless or heartless. No one had ever seen through his heart. As the blue scorpion divine whip attacked, 5 Poisons did not dodge. Instead, he separated his hands. Whoosh, whoosh, his long sleeves fluttered in the wind. Looking again, his hands formed a technique. In front of him, a strange space-time crack suddenly appeared. There seemed to be a white figure inside the crack. However, a faint yellow light shot out from the space-time crack. It was an extremely ancient power that spread out from the space-time crack. That aura did not seem to belong to the 5 Poisons world. It made everyone raise their eyebrows. 5 Poisons divine steel? At this moment, some of the spectating 5 Poisons elders cried out in surprise. As for the others, their faces were pale, because some of them had participated in the Holiness War back then. That was the darkest period of the 5 Poison world. At that time, the 5 Poisons planet was almost destroyed. None of them wanted to go back to the past. The 5 Poisons divine steel was a treasure that could only be used by venerable 5 Poisons. It was also one of the 2 Lianbua items from the 5 Poisons realm. However, its fame far surpassed that of the blue scorpion god's whip. The appearance of the divine steel could suppress the 5 Poisons. Back then, during the Sage Seizing War, if not for Green Snake, Madame Scorpion, and the others' continuous battles, which resulted in the exhaustion of the venerable sage's power and the inability to control the 5 Poisons' divine steel, Green Snake would not have been able to obtain the venerable sage's position. When he looked again, venerable 5 Poisons parted his hands. A yellowish-brown stone tablet slowly emerged from the space-time rift. Its speed of extraction was very slow. It was like a single seedling breaking out of the soil. However, at that moment, the time and space around it seemed to slow down. Madame Scorpion's blue god's whip rapidly approached. However, when it was a few hundred feet away from venerable 5 Poisons, it suddenly slowed down. Even Madame Scorpion's speed slowed down. Everything seemed to be in slow motion. It was an extremely special stone tablet. It was nearly 3 feet tall and was yellowish-brown in color. Its surface was full of potholes and was covered with the marks of time. It did not look like a Lianbua item at all. Instead, it looked more like a piece of useless rock. On the front of the stone tablet, there was only a simple pattern. The pattern was made up of concentric circles. At the center of the circle was an ordinary white dot. It looked very ordinary. On the back of the stone tablet, there were pictures of the 5 Poisons. Scorpion, poisonous snake, centipede, toad, gecko. They formed a circle. In the middle of the circle, there was a strange seal. Sumo frowned when she saw the stone tablet. She seemed to have seen that seal somewhere before. However, it was obvious that the 5 Poisons pattern was imprinted with a spell. There was definitely no 5 Poisons pattern on that stone tablet. This stone tablet was very special. At this moment, it was completely pulled out of the space-time crack. Then, the space-time crack disappeared. At the same time, everything in the surroundings returned to normal. At this moment, Sumo acutely sensed that the slow space-time just now was not because of the stone tablet, but because of the world behind it. Where did this reputation come from? Boom! Crack. However, Sumo did not have time to think about it. In an instant, the blue scorpion divine whip pierced the 5 Poisons divine tablet. The 5 Poisons divine tablet shook violently, while the blue scorpion divine whip was sent flying. Blue light and yellow light exploded. The entire sky shook. The 2 Lianbua items clashed. The power was unimaginable. The 1,000-mile battlefield just now was no longer enough. In an instant, thousands of miles of dust flew. On the 5-poison star, the mountains crumbled and the people were plunged into misery. From this moment on, the 5-poison star headed towards destruction. Mushroom-like clouds rose from the void, rolling up layer by layer, covering the entire sky. Between the layers of spiritual clouds, Madame Scorpion turned into a yellow rainbow and directly rushed out. She did not stop. Instead, she and her lotus clashed against the 5-poison's divine sage. That was simply a suicidal strategy. At this moment, the 5-poison's divine sage's eyes were pitch black. The black lotus under his feet swayed continuously. Layers of black gas had already protected the 5-poison's divine sage. The 5-poison's divine tablet was right in front of him. He was confident that Madame Scorpion would not be able to break this lienbois. However, Madame Scorpion did not slow down. Everyone was stunned by this scene. Madame Scorpion was committing suicide. But then, a miraculous scene appeared. Just when everyone thought that Madame Scorpion would ruthlessly crash into the 5-poison's divine tablet. Whoosh! Madame Scorpion suddenly disappeared. Everyone was stunned. The 5-poison's divine sage's eyes also slightly moved. Cloud-piercing technique. That was the most ancient technique in the 5-poison's realm. Even the elders present did not know about it. It was a technique that allowed one to instantly travel through time. In the past millions of years, there were only 3 cultivators from the 5-poison's realm who could successfully learn that technique. That was because it required millions of years of bitter meditation. Madame Scorpion succeeded. Madame Scorpion's figure went through the 5-poison's divine tablet. Or rather, she changed the time and space around the 5-poison's divine tablet. Crackle! The blue divine whip danced once again. It carried the power of wind and thunder, or rather, it swept up the wind and thunder. At that moment, the 5-poison's divine sage could not escape. The distance was too close. The 5-poison's divine sage's lips curled into an indescribable smile. He opened his hands, as if preparing for his last resistance. Endless black light surged from his body. Boom! The blue scorpion divine whip had arrived. However, at that moment, Madame Scorpion's eyes suddenly flashed with a horrifying expression, because there was no power coming from the 5-poison's divine sage. It was a hug. The green snake, Madame Scorpion suddenly shouted. She leaped up and went straight for Madame Scorpion. At the same time, Sumo flew up and the lotus vine in her hand swept toward Madame Scorpion. Chapter 992. Madame Venerable Saint was at the peak of the 9th layer Venerable Realm. She absolutely did not expect Venerable 5-poisons to not resist at the last moment. The black lotus between Madame Venerable Sage's eyebrows had completely bloomed. That was the black lotus origin energy. Above her head, there was an extremely strange black lotus. That black lotus could have controlled Venerable 5-poisons. However, she could not sense the existence of the black lotus in 5-poison supremacy's body. She had no idea what was wrong there. At the most crucial moment, Venerable 5-poisons actually lost control. However, she wanted to kill Madame Scorpion. That way, he might be able to save Venerable 5-poisons. The scene in front of them was something that none of the cultivators present could understand, because they were not among them. The elders of the 5-poison sacred sect didn't know what was going on. They could not sense that Venerable 5-poison sage had given up resisting, so they thought that it was still a showdown. Madame Scorpion did not expect this either. However, at this moment, she could no longer withdraw her attack. However, she saw a long-lost smile appear on the face of the 5-poison saint, who had always been cold and numb. His smile was as warm as it was yesterday. In that instant, it was enough to melt a million-years-old profound ice. Senior Martial Brother, Madame Scorpion shouted in her mind, but she couldn't make a sound at all, because everything was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. The blue scorpion god whip in her hand could no longer be withdrawn. Her body charged straight toward Venerable 5-poisons. Everything could not be redeemed. Zihua, may you live forever. Five poisoned saint's body did not emit any power of harm, but a voice rang in Madame Scorpion's ears. It was a voice that only she could hear. Zihua, may you live forever. Boom! Crack! Madame Scorpion crashed in a Five Poisons venerable sage's embrace, and then she felt herself being hugged tightly by him. At that moment, everyone saw venerable Five Poisons emit a dazzling brilliance. The Five Poisons' godly steel floated above his head. Hu! Hua! The Five Poisons' divine steel suddenly emitted a white light. The aura that caused time and space to freeze appeared once again. Both Madame Reverend Sage and Sumo were temporarily trapped in the void. That kind of calmness was something they could hardly feel. At the same time, a strange rune appeared behind Five Poisons' saint. It reincarnated and was actually a ray of light. The black robe on Five Poisons' venerable sage's body suddenly changed color. A green light suddenly appeared and plated the black robe. That was the original color of the green snake. He was handsome and dashing in the wind. It was the green snake from before. It was a pity that Madame Scorpion couldn't see it, because he was tightly held by the green snake's power. At that moment, Madame Scorpion's body and mind felt empty. Actually, she really wanted to break free, but she couldn't. Green Snake's smiling face and the way he called out to Zihua still appeared in her mind. What was all this for? She was bewildered and hopeless. However, this kind of despair was different from before. Wang was right. In fact, deep in Madame Scorpion's heart, she did not know that she still loved her senior brother. Her existence revolved around the green snake. Be it life or death, be it love or hate, there was only the green snake in her world. Her revenge was more like an obsession. If the green snake died, she would not be able to live. Madame Scorpion only had 3 days to live, which was why she was so determined to charge at the green snake. She could die together with the green snake. However, she did not expect what was happening in front of her. Everything in the past had collapsed in an instant. At this moment, it was like the time when the green snake hugged Zihua passionately. Life or death. Rotation. Madame Reverend Saint was only 10 zhang away from Madame Scorpion, but she could not stop Madame Scorpion. She could only watch helplessly. She heard the last cry of the green snake with her own ears. Life or death. Rotation. What was that? That was a technique that she had never heard of before. Not only her, but all the cultivators present had never heard of that technique before, because that was a technique that the green snake had cultivated for millions of years. It was all for this moment. Only at this moment could he break free from the Black Lotus and save Madame Scorpion. His millions of years of cultivation were all for this final moment. Life or death. Rotation. Looking again, the light on the green snake's body suddenly poured into Madame Scorpion's body. The green snake's body suddenly started to change. His green robe felt like a butterfly. That was like a rapidly withering flower. His physical body suddenly dried up like rice that had been burned by a fire. Then his body was covered in black scales. His long hair instantly turned white. Countless crisscrossing scars appeared on his face. Sumo, Wang Yu, and the rest had seen this kind of injury before, because that was the injury on Madame Scorpion's face. Everything that Madame Scorpion had in the past was transferred to the green snake's body. That scene caused Wang Yu and Shun Ming to be dumbfounded. That was a technique that was even more advanced than the death substitution technique, because it was changing a kind of fate. The green snake's body started to burn. This kind of fire, Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming had all seen it before. It was the power of the 9 lives rejuvenation pill. Half of the green snake's body was turning into pus and then dissipating with the wind. Green snake, Madame Reverend Saint shouted. But the green snake had completely broken free from her Black Lotus power, or rather, the green snake had already started to die. Senior brother, Madame Scorpion was also shouting, but she was shouting in her heart, because her entire body was being enveloped by a great force. Lotus power poured in. Madame Scorpion's yellow robe was glowing with green light. The green light poured into Madame Scorpion's body and into her Dan Si. Madame Scorpion originally did not have a Dan-C, because, in essence, the 9 Lives Rejuvenation Pill was a type of poison. Basically, Madame Scorpion was not a true Lotus Knight, but a Lotus Knight with the power of 3 days. She could turn into a lotus externally, but her Dan-C was empty. However, as the green snake's lotus power poured in, the image of a green lotus appeared in her Dan-C. A lotus seed was planted in her Dan-C. At that moment, Madame Scorpion became a true Lotus Knight, and streams of scarlet air were forced out of her body. That was the pill poison of the 9 Lives Rejuvenation Pill. In other words, the green snake's final technique changed Madame Scorpion's fate. She no longer needed to die. Boom! The last half of the green snake's body started to dissipate and suddenly exploded at the last moment. Madame Scorpion's body shook. That tight, binding feeling finally disappeared completely. But she did not move. At that moment, Madame Scorpion seemed to have lost her soul, and she stood in the air, stupefied. Her eyes were empty and frightening. But the power of time and space on the 5 Poisons' divine steel had disappeared. Whoosh! Madame Venerable had already rushed to Madame Scorpion's side. The black lotus on her forehead suddenly turned into a black sword, and it pierced toward Madame Scorpion's back. If that sword hit, Madame Scorpion would die for sure. But Sumo's lotus vine had already arrived. Boom! Pa! The lotus vine directly hit the black sword. They were both at the peak of the venerable realm, but Sumo's Lianbois was a top-grade venerable. As a result, the black sword that had manifested was immediately dispersed. At the same time, Sumo turned her wrist. The lotus vine curled up and wrapped around Madame Venerable's waist. Sumo exerted force in her hand, and she forcefully pulled Madame Venerable's waist and threw her into the air. Crack! On the 5 Poisons star, the darkness of the 2 poles was about to close, and Madame Venerable, who was in Sumo's hand, was thrown into the crack that was about to close. Boom! Crack! Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Madame Venerable's face was as pale as a sheet, but the black lotus on her forehead suddenly exploded. Chapter 993. The black lotuses exploded with immortal power. Just now, the darkness that was closing suddenly separated. At that moment, the entire 5 Poisons planet trembled. The black lotuses above Madame Venerable's head contained lotus power. Now it was like a fuse that ignited everything. Boom! Boom! The entire sky of the 5 Poisons planet seemed to shatter. Black clouds exploded one after another. At that moment, Madame Venerable wanted to escape, but she was still entangled by the lotus vines. Earlier, Madame Venerable did not pay much attention to Sumo, because in her eyes, Sumo and the others were not worth mentioning. She thought that the cultivator from the other world could be destroyed easily, but she was wrong. She did not expect Sumo to have Lianbois, and a top-grade Lianbois at that. At that moment, she saw Sumo's white robe and Sumo's beautiful face. There was such a beautiful man in the infinite worlds. At that moment, Madame Venerable's heart skipped a beat. This was because she had always liked handsome men, but Sumo only gave her a chance to look at him. Sumo did not have a good impression of Madame Venerable. He said that Madame Venerable would regret it. In the void, thunder rumbled and black fog rolled. At that moment, everyone knew that the entire 5 Poisons planet was being destroyed. The elders of the 5 Poisons divine sect looked on blankly. Even if the 5 Poisons planet was destroyed, they would be able to protect themselves. However, what should he do with the current situation? They did not have an answer. Destroy. At that moment, Sumo raised an eyebrow. When she looked again, the lotus vines suddenly emitted an endless green light. Even on the 5 Poisons star, the green light was shining with an incomparably resplendent light. Boom! A loud explosion. The lotus vines suddenly tightened and forcefully crushed Madame Venerable's body. The black fog exploded, causing everyone's heart to tremble. The elders of the 5 Poisons divine sect were shocked. They did not understand Madame Venerable's death. Just now, when Madame Reverend Sheng was swept up by Sumo's lotus vines, their feelings were very complicated. Should they save him or not? Should they escape or not? However, Sumo didn't let them struggle for too long. In the blink of an eye, the Saint Madam's physical body was destroyed. The flesh of the ninth layer Martial Highness realm was even stronger than the five-poison star. However, under Sumo's lotus vines, they were like chicken eggs. The physical body dissipated, but the divine soul still existed for a moment. That moment seemed very long to Madame Venerable Saint. In fact, even Madame Reverend Saint herself did not expect that she would die in the hands of this alien cultivator. She knew that she was about to fall. Could that cultivator from the other world be a Lotus Knight? At that moment, Madame Reverend Saint was a little dazed. She remembered seeing a peerlessly beautiful face just now. That face seemed to resemble that of a green snake. Green snake? Hee hee. Madame Zuansheng smiled bitterly in her heart, because she had always thought that she could completely control the green snake. Whether green snake was willing or not, he must listen to her orders. Over 1,000,000 years, that was indeed the case. Even if green snake was unwilling, he had never disobeyed her. She was the absolute queen of the five poisons realm. Her real name was Black White, and her true identity was a Black Lotus Knight. After Green Snake and the Black Lotus made a contract, everything in the five poisons realm was under her control. She could control the Black Lotus inside Green Snake's body. In this sense, the Green Snake was her puppet. However, she fell in love with Green Snake. She liked Green Snake's handsome face, liked his temperament. However, she also knew that the most important woman in Green Snake's heart was Madame Scorpion. Therefore, she thought of all ways to torture Madame Scorpion. She wanted to possess and control him. She was once very satisfied with Green Snake's performance. Therefore, she listened to Green Snake's suggestion and did not kill Madame Scorpion, but left her a way out. Now, she understood that this way out was Green Snake's way out. He used over 1,000,000 years of humiliation in exchange for his final freedom. In other words, he wanted Madame Scorpion's freedom. Green Snake succeeded. His last technique completely broke free of the Black Lotus control. Over 1,000,000 years ago, when Green Snake accepted Black Lotus' gift and made a contract with him, he never would have thought that his choice would not only cause him to lose himself, his true love, it would cause the entire five poisons realm to sink into endless darkness. Life and death cycle. To Green Snake, that was a kind of redemption. Day and night, they had been together, but 1,000,000 years later, it was all for nothing. The moment Green Snake died, Madame Saint understood that five poisons realm, the Black Lotus Dark World, would become an abandoned pawn, because Black Lotus did not need a powerful world. Black Lotus' final goal was for these worlds to be purified. Once Green Snake died, she, Black White, had no value. She would not obtain anything. A dream, a tear, an emptiness. Boom! Black White intuitively saw endless light appear in front of her. The light was so blinding, she had never seen such a world. Death was so beautiful. Boom! Then she lost all her senses. At this time, from the perspective of the people on Five Poison Star, Sumo's lotus vines had completely scattered Madame Saint's soul. Her soul was gone. Madame Saint had also died. In an instant, the dragons were leaderless. The venerable elders looked at each other. If they went against Sumo, they would only die. Plus, whether it was Five Poisons' venerable saint or Madame Saint, they had never been kind to them. So at this time, they definitely would not fight to the death. Madame Scorpion. Madame, the cultivators looked at each other, then knelt down in front of Madame Scorpion together. From their perspective, the one most capable of leading the Five Poisons divine sect at this time was Madame Scorpion. With Madame Scorpion's prestige, she only needed to make one move. Then, even if Five Poison Star was destroyed, with the other 5 stars, she could ensure the survival of the Five Poisons divine sect. At this time, thunder rumbled. The void of Five Poison Star was exploding continuously. A portion of the Five Poisons divine sect cultivators still did not understand what was happening on this star. However, the core of Five Poisons Star had not exploded yet. The most powerful storm had yet to come. At this time, the venerable elders were hoping that Madame Scorpion could turn the tide and save everything. Madam Scorpion, Madam Scorpion. Their first two shouts were ignored by Madam Scorpion. So, they anxiously shouted again. Madam Scorpion stood in the void in a daze, but her lotus chi was enough to protect herself. All the forces automatically avoided Madam Scorpion. Madam Scorpion finally made a sound, but it was an extremely sad and strange laughter. Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming heard it. It sounded like she was laughing before she took the 9-death rejuvenation pill. Madam Scorpion, you're awake? One of the elders asked worriedly. Madam Scorpion smiled at that elder, but her expression suddenly turned cold. Then, her long sleeves suddenly waved. The wind picked up. Before the elder who just spoke understood what was happening, he was directly hit into the void by Madam Scorpion. With a boom, his soul was destroyed. All the venerable elder's expressions changed. Can any of you tell me why? Madam Scorpion's eyes were bloodshot, her face pale. She crazily screamed, Why? But she would never get the answer. Things in the infinite worlds were often like this. At this moment, Madam Scorpion started a massacre. Blood filled the sky. Chapter 994. His yellow robes fluttered in the wind like a mad demon. Madam Scorpion did not stop after killing the 5 poisons elder. Instead, her killing intent soared to the sky. At that moment, she was like a tiger that had entered a flock of sheep, like a god of slaughter that had descended. A total of 17 elders of the 5 poisons Saint Venerate had appeared today. Yifu had already been killed by Wu Bai. The remaining 16 did not escape Madam Scorpion's grasp, because none of them could answer Madam Scorpion's question. Among them, there were some who wanted to escape, but in front of the Lotus Warriors, they simply did not have the ability to escape. Madam Scorpion killed 1 person with each move. In her opinion, the remaining 5 poisons elders all deserved to die. They were helping the evildoer. Other than Yi Fu, who had died first, they could all be killed. Madam Scorpion did not hold back at all. The last 3 venerable realm experts were smashed to pieces by her whip, and their souls dissipated. Madam Scorpion held the blue scorpion divine whip in her hand and laughed towards the sky. However, as she laughed, she began to cry. Originally, Madam Scorpion had no more tears, but now her tears flowed like a fountain. Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming did not stop her. Killing might allow her to vent. Crying might calm her down. Sumo and the others didn't know the specifics, but they could roughly guess what was going on. The 5 poisons star continued to be destroyed. The 5 sectors of 5 poisons star had already begun to collapse. The buildings at the headquarters of the 5 poisons sacred sect had all collapsed. The black clouds above the north and south poles had all exploded. At this time, from Vast Universe's perspective, the 5 poison star was a star that was on the verge of exploding. This dark star was being destroyed. Lady Scorpion, my condolences. After a while, Sumo slowly said. At this time, Wang Yu and Shun Ming also revealed their true faces. Madam Scorpion's screams gradually stopped. At this moment, she had calmed down a little. She was trying her best to control her emotions. She saw the 5 poison star being destroyed bit by bit, but there was no pity in her eyes. Originally, Madam Scorpion loved Planet 5 Poison. After all, it was her home planet. In fact, with Madam Scorpion's current strength, she could totally turn the tables. A true Lotus Knight could create his own world. The star core of the 5 Venoms star had not exploded yet. Naturally, there was still a way to save it. However, Madam Scorpion wasn't going to do that. She stopped crying and killing, but it didn't mean that the sorrow and despair in her heart were no longer pervasive. On the contrary, those things had completely occupied her heart. Madam Scorpion waved her hand. Hua. As she waved her hand, the power of the entire 5 poison star was swept away. They were like the waves of the sea, carrying with them rolling thunder and lightning, spreading to both sides. In the sky above the 5 poison star, an incomparably bright zone appeared. At that moment, the surviving 5 poisons planet cultivators couldn't help but look up at the sky. They saw the power of light, the hope of life. Madame Scorpion had the power to destroy heaven and earth, but she also had the power to rebuild everything. At this moment, the future of the five-poison world was in her hands. Senior Marshal Brother, you actually said that you would give me eternal life? Madame Scorpion laughed hysterically. At that moment, she seemed to see the appearance of a green snake in the light of the five-poison star. Cute and hateful. You gave me your power, and then you want me to reconstruct the five-poison realm, right? Huh. Madame Scorpion looked at the light in the sky. Madame Scorpion was a peerless beauty. Her face still had crystal-clear tears. Her beauty was indescribable. At this moment, her eyes were clear and filled with despair. It was a kind of gaze that made people who saw it not know what to do. But, Senior Marshal Brother, if you're not here, what is the meaning of this world? Madame Scorpion smiled. Whether it is the immortal scorpion or the five poisons world, none of them will be my final destination. I am only a woman. The final destination that I yearn for should always be in your heart. So, I am sorry, Senior Marshal Brother. Madame Scorpion's tone gradually became calm, because the moment she knew that the green snake had died, she had already made a decision. Little brother, where are you from? Madame Scorpion suddenly turned to Sumo and said, I am the Demon King of the Three Realms. Sumo said, I come from a world called the Three Realms Galaxy, and Izong swallowed my home. Madame Scorpion smiled and nodded, then said, Then what is your name? Sumo. Sumo said, Good. Madame Scorpion nodded again. Then she took a deep breath. Thank you for your pill. I am finally free. And everything that has happened now is far better than what I had imagined. That dark spirit Scorpion King is nothing. I will give these 2 lianbua to you. Saying that, Madame Scorpion waved her hand. The blue Scorpion God Whip and the 5 poisons God Steel were directly sent to Sumo. Madame Scorpion? Sumo wanted to say something, but Madame Scorpion shook her head. Demon King, this is my choice. No matter right or wrong, I will not be a puppet. I will only listen to my heart's call. So, you do not need to say anything. Sumo let out a long sigh, received the 2 treasures, and kept them in her cosmos bag. It is fate that brought us together. Madame Scorpion smiled again. I have one more thing for you. That way you can control the 5 poisons God Steel. The 3 of you, take care. Hua. After saying that, Madame Scorpion formed a seal with her hands. The surging lotus power caused Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming to involuntarily retreat. Luckily, it was not a power that could harm them. At that moment, Madame Scorpion was the ruler. Looking again, Madame Scorpion's forehead suddenly emitted a ray of light. Then, a lotus flower flew out from between her brows. Green leaves, white lotus, incomparably bright. Lotus seed, and that lotus went straight for Sumo. Currently, Sumo seemed to be imprisoned in the void by Madame Scorpion. Boom! Sumo felt a green and white light flash in front of him, and his mind was buzzing. That lotus seed was actually directly passed to Sumo and sank into her dance sea. In an instant, it created 100,000 zhong wave. Madame Scorpion. Sumo never would have thought that Madame Scorpion would pass the lotus seed she just obtained to him. And at this moment, Madame Scorpion's hand seal was completed. Self-destruct. Boom, boom. On the 5 poison star, endless mysterious light lit up. That mysterious light pierced through heaven and earth. From one ray to another, it covered the entire star. At that moment, the other 5 stars of the 5 poisons world could see that mysterious light through space and time. It was as if the entire universe was about to be ignited. Madame Scorpion chose the most decisive method. Not only did she self-destruct, she also took away the 5 poison star, and even the entire 5 poisons world. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. 10,000 thoughts extinguished. 10,000 things turned into nothingness. Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming were enveloped by Madame Scorpion's power. It was as if they were inside a crystal ball, watching the 5 poison star explode. That star was completely destroyed. Its power even rushed out of the dark world, and the other 5 stars also began to explode. This was a calamity in the universe. The Five Poisons world was completely destroyed. Dust billowed in the universe, and a new black hole was forming where the original Five Poisons world was. And at the edge of the darkness, a gray-clothed cultivator slowly walked towards Sumo's group. He had waited for a long time. Chapter 995. The destruction of a star or a small world wasn't anything at all to vast universe. After all, creation and destruction happen all the time. Even in the Glaze realm, the destruction of the Five Poison Star would not cause much of a stir. The so-called major events were usually targeted at the people involved. To those who were not involved, they did not matter. Just like how they would never mourn the fall of an unrelated star in the vast universe, because it was not the sun. The interstellar dust of the Five Poison Star realm was still spreading. It was a process that would take tens of thousands of years to spread like a rolling tide. There were probably only a handful of cultivators who would be able to escape from this calamity. The Five Poison Star was the center of this calamity. Hence, the area it was in was the first to calm down. The protection that Madame Scorpion had left on Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shen Ming also gradually faded. They had witnessed the destruction of too many worlds and did not feel anything. However, they all felt sorry for Madame Scorpion. "Sister, if you were Madame Scorpion, what would you choose?" Shen Ming asked. "The same as her." Wang Yu did not hesitate. Green Snake has been a puppet for millions of years. Actually, he wanted to give all the opportunities to Madame Scorpion. But Madame Scorpion only wants him. All of this is a contradiction, because Green Snake's Final Tao technique can break through everything. However, he will also fall. Madame Scorpion did the right thing. She will not be a puppet and will only listen to the call of her heart. If it were me, I would also choose to bury the entire Five Poison Star. But what about the Five Poisons? Shen Ming asked. "Kiki." Wang Yu laughed coldly. "Why do I have to hold the lives of all living beings in my heart? My heart is very small, and it has long been filled. I'm not a true Blue Sea disciple. Don't you have my brother, the Demon King, and the others to do things for the common people?" Shen Ming was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled and said, "Sister, what you said makes sense. In the future, I want to be like you. Unfortunately, you don't have a brother." Wang Yu rolled his eyes at Shen Ming. Shen Ming. At this time, Sumo did not interrupt. He looked at the distant starry sky with a solemn expression. This was because he saw a gray-clothed cultivator walking through the billowing dust. In theory, there were no longer any cultivators in the Five Poison Star boundary. They were either dead or had escaped. No cultivator was willing to stay in a destroyed world. They all had to protect themselves. However, that gray-clothed cultivator suddenly and calmly appeared in the Five Poisons world's billowing dust. This meant that the gray-robed cultivator had always been there. He had been on the Five Poison Star before, but he had not shown himself. Lotus Warrior? Sumo's heart tightened. Other than the Five Poisons Venerable Sage, the Five Poisons realm also had Lotus Warriors. Before this, no one had discovered the existence of this cultivator. Wang Yu and Shen Ming stopped talking, because they also saw that gray-clothed cultivator. He was tall and thin, and his appearance was delicate. They had never seen the gray-clothed cultivator's appearance before. However, he had an aura that they felt was familiar. 100 feet away, the gray-clothed cultivator stopped. This distance was already an absolute attack range. Therefore, he did not move forward. "Demon King, it's an honor to meet you." The gray-clothed cultivator looked at Sumo from afar. "Who are you?" Sumo asked. "The second swordsman." The gray-clothed cultivator smiled faintly. "You killed many of our swordsmen previously." "The second swordsman?" Sumo could not help but raise her eyebrows. Previously, he had been intercepted by 4 great swordsmen at the interstellar barrier, and in the end, he had self-destructed his demonic boat. If not for Ji Guang's rescue, he would have died. However, the 4 swordsmen last time were at the peak of the Supremacy Realm. This time, it was the Lotus Realm. A hidden Lotus warrior had finally appeared. Sumo involuntarily took 2 steps forward in order to better block Wang Yu and Shenming. Both of them were not yet at the supremacy realm. As long as the swordsman had a second thought, they could be killed. The gray-clothed cultivator, seemed to know what Sumo was thinking. Demon King, don't worry. I'm only following orders to kill you. As long as the others do not make a move, I will not kill them. In a while, none of you are allowed to make a move. Otherwise, you will only cause trouble for me. Sumo said to Wang Yu and Shenming. Both of them nodded slowly. Facing a Lotus warrior was not the time to show off. Sumo, don't worry. However, Wang Yu added lightly, he will definitely not dare to touch me and Ming because we are from Luo Fan Town. Sumo nodded. Demon King, I really did not expect that you could make my master issue a silver fish order to send me to kill you. Last time, I thought you had fallen. Oh? Sumo laughed. I really want to know, who is your master? Black Blind Warrior. The second swordsman did not hide it like the other swordsmen, but directly answered Sumo's question. Black Blind Warrior? Sumo frowned. She had never heard of this name. Black Blind Warrior is a protector under Izong Dharmaraja. We are all his subordinates, so people call us Black Blind Swordsmen. The second swordsman said. Izong Dharmaraja? Sumo asked again. Then who is Izong Dharmaraja? Izong Dharmaraja is Izong Dharmaraja, the second swordsman said. However, if you ask for his title, is Heartless. Heartless King is Izong Dharmaraja. Heartless King. This title, Sumo? This was the first time he heard of it. This was also the highest ranked enemy he knew. One must know that Dharmaraja King was above Lotus Warrior. Moreover, there could only be one Dharmaraja in the entire Izong world. That was an existence that Sumo could not hope to reach at the moment. Izong Dharmaraja, Wang Yu and Shenming looked at each other, because in Luo Fan Town, they heard that there was no Dharmaraja in the Izong world. Then, why does he want to kill me? Sumo laughed coldly. Presumably, the destruction of the Three Realms galaxy was related to him, right? He was not willing to see the growth of the galaxy Lotus Soul. When we kill, we don't ask why. Warrior, if you want me to kill, I will kill. The second swordsman laughed. However, I am willing to answer you. Actually, the worlds need to develop and evolve, and you have become an obstacle. The galaxy was originally a low-level world. It was natural for it to be devoured and destroyed. What a good natural. Sumo's face turned slightly cold. The reason why you are telling me so much is because you are confident that you can kill me, right? Yes. The second swordsman answered straightforwardly. You are different from the previous swordsman, Sumo said. Actually, before this, you had many opportunities to make a move. You could even join forces with the Holy Lady of the Five Poisons world. That way, your chances of winning would be higher. That's right. The second swordsman nodded. But if that was the case, I would not be the second swordsman. I am a swordsman, but I am different from them. Every cultivator that I kill them head-on. I disdain sneak attacks. I do not need anyone's help. This is my way of being a swordsman. It seems that you have never failed before. Sumo laughed coldly. Of course. The second swordsman also laughed. I have killed at least 9 Lotus warriors, and you are only at the peak of the 9th stage, Venerable. Even if you have the Lianbua to protect you, and have the ability to transcend levels, you are still not my opponent. Sumo nodded. In fact, he knew that what the second swordsman said was not wrong. However, he naturally would not sit and wait for death. Whoosh, Sumo's hand shook, and the lotus vine was already released. It was like a green dragon, directly binding the second swordsman. At the same time, the Kuan Soul Saber in Sumo's right hand also moved. This was, after all, a battle of life and death. Chapter 996. Whoosh, the Lotus Vine and the Kuan Soul Blade were both top-grade Lianbua. Su-Mo summoned them at the same time in order to gain the upper hand. Now, the entire Five Poisons realm had been destroyed. This place had become their interstellar battlefield. The Lotus Vine was like a dragon, and the Kuan Soul split the sky. The two Lianbua stirred up waves in the five poisons realm that had yet to settle. Whoosh, whoosh. If the entire five poisons realm was a raging sea that had yet to subside, then Sumo's two Lianbua were the evil dragons that stirred up the sea again. Waves rose, and smoke rose from thousands of miles away. It was a power that would make most cultivators frown in shock. Wang Yu pulled Shun Ming and hurriedly retreated. The forbidden map appeared under their feet again. Otherwise, they would not be able to survive in the five poisons realm. It could be said that Sumo did not hold back when she attacked, because he knew that the second swordsman was a Lotus Knight and would not give him any chance. The two Lianbua swept up the world. Sumo increased the power that he could mobilize to the extreme. His white robe was like a snowflake in space, but this snowflake brought with it the coldness of a blizzard. Facing such a situation, the second swordsman's expression was as usual, and he was not shocked at all, because no matter how much Sumo improved himself, he was still at the peak of the venerable realm. He was not a Lotus Knight. Even with the Lianbua, he could not be compared to a real Lotus Knight. Below the Lotus Knight, Sumo was invincible. However, there was a world of difference between a Lotus Knight and a Venerable. Venerable and Lotus Knights were fundamentally different. Even a peak 9th tier Venerable could not be compared to an ordinary Lotus Knight, let alone the second swordsman, who was a killer among Lotus Knights. As he said, he had killed more than one Lotus Knight, let alone a Venerable like Sumo. He was not arrogant, but he had the confidence. Therefore, when Sumo's Lianbua was used, it was indeed shocking and shook the world. However, for the second swordsman, it was nothing. He had seen such scenes too many times. He did not draw his sword at all. The second swordsman stood in the void, watching Sumo's two Lianbua attacks, but he separated his hands. The shadow of a lotus appeared in space. Boom! Crack! Sumo's lotus vines and the Kuin soul blade struck the lotus flower at almost the same time. In an instant, the storm of power swept everything. The lotus vines and the Kuin soul saber were blasted away by the lotus flower. It wasn't that the lotus vine and the Kuin soul blade weren't high enough, but rather that Sumo didn't have the lotus power to unleash their full power. Once again, Sumo was invincible below the Lotus Warrior level. Sumo could kill a 9th layer Martial Venerable with a single slash. However, in front of a true Lotus Warrior, he was not strong enough. Bang! However, the second swordsman's Lotus Shadow was also shattered by the Lotus Vines and the Kuin Soul Saber. The second swordsman nodded slightly when he saw it. It seemed that sending other swordsmen to kill Sumo was a mistake. Unless it was a Lotus Warrior, a peak Martial Venerable would not be able to kill Sumo. Demon King, let's end this. The second swordsman advocated a head-on fight, but that didn't mean he would give Sumo a chance. On the contrary, his killer's instinct made him give it his all in every move. As soon as the lotus scattered, the second swordsman took advantage of the moment when Sumo's two Lianbua were blasted away to attack again. Sword light. The second swordsman didn't draw his sword, and Sumo didn't even see it. However, the second swordsman's body suddenly emitted endless sword energy. That was the strongest sword energy Sumo had ever seen. The second swordsman's swordsmanship had reached a level that Sumo couldn't understand. The endless light condensed into a single point. Chi! Hua! Sumo felt as if a blazing sun suddenly appeared in the distance, and then a beam of divine light came straight at her. Within that divine light, there was boundless might. This power was very similar to the binding power that burst out from Madame Scorpion's body. Realm suppression. That was the most common and effective attack between cultivators of different realms. Fortunately, Sumo still had Lianbua on her, otherwise Sumo wouldn't be able to withstand this realm suppression. The sword light came, and Sumo felt endless pressure. Then his mind moved. Boom! Dang! Hum! The second swordsman's eyebrows slightly twitched, because he saw an ancient bell suddenly appear above Sumo's head, and his sword light hit that ancient bell. Yin-Yang Bell, life and death. This time, the second swordsman used his own lotus power to ring the Yin-Yang Bell. In an instant, the entire five poisons world shook. It was almost a resonance. Hum! Boom! The yin-yang bell rang, and all the world shook. In an instant, the five-poisoned world that had yet to dissipate was once again torn apart by the endless, immortal power. It fell into the second wave of resonance destruction. With Sumo and the second swordsman as the center, a giant wave of 10,000 feet once again spread out. Wang Yu and Shun Ming took out the protective magic treasures in their hands at the same time. Those magic treasures were absolute, venerable divine weapons. At the same time, with a thought, they directly went thousands of miles away, and the forbidden map under their feet suddenly lit up. Only then did they barely block the sound wave. Bang, bang. Even so, one of the protective magic treasures had already been directly broken. Wang Yu and Shun Ming couldn't help but change their expressions. It seemed that even if the second swordsman didn't intend to kill them, the aftermath of the Lotus Warrior's spell could be fatal. Fuse, Wang Yu said to Shun Ming. With that, the two of them made a hand seal at the same time. In an instant, the two sisters merged into one. In this way, they were in the venerable realm. With magic treasures and forbidden maps, they could still watch the battle from afar. At this time, the second swordsman suffered the biggest impact. The yin-yang bell was Sumo's magic treasure. Therefore, all the sound waves had no effect on Sumo. But the second swordsman was different. He bore the brunt of the sound waves. That was equivalent to a blow from a Lotus Warrior. Sword come! The second swordsman waved his long sleeves and shouted. It turned out that he hadn't used his sword before. The so-called sword light was only formed by his Lotus power. But now, the yin-yang bell's attack was too fierce. He had to use his sword. Whoosh! Looking again, a space crack appeared in the void. In the crack, a white light suddenly appeared in front of the second swordsman like a white dragon. That was a lianbua. As soon as it appeared, it directly split the air waves, rushing toward the second swordsman. The yin-yang bell's attack disappeared in an instant. Whoosh! The second swordsman held a sword in his hand. Previously, he really didn't expect that Sumo could so easily force him to use a sword. It should be known that he hadn't used a sword for a long time, because there was no need. Silver Moon. The second swordsman looked at the sword in his hand, and his eyes instantly had a trace of tenderness. This will be the last time you accompany me to kill people. Once the silver fish token is gone, you and I will live in seclusion in the Crescent Lake. From then on, we will no longer enter the Jianghu. The Black Blind Swordsman has promised me freedom. We can quietly wait for Yizong to be purified. Buzz! The Silver Moon immortal sword made a dragon roar, as if it understood the second swordsman's words. The second swordsman's mouth curved into a smile, but it immediately disappeared. Kill! After saying that, the second swordsman's eyes turned cold. His body burst out an unparalleled, murderous aura. The kind of murderous aura couldn't be compared to all the previous black and white swordsmen combined. Among the black and white swordsmen, the gray robe was the second. However, the number of Lotus warriors he killed was the first, because the first swordsman had never made a move. He, Li Mu, was the terminator of Lotus warriors. He had never failed. Whoosh! The gray robe fluttered, and the silver moon danced. A long silver rainbow appeared in the starry sky, heading straight for Sumo. Chapter 997. The silver moon was a curved longsword. It really looked like a crescent moon. The second swordsman's sword released a silver moonlight that pierced through the stars. That sword directly bypassed the yin-yang bell. In the moonlight, there was endless Lotus power. That sword could definitely kill a Lotus warrior. At this time, Sumo's face was already slightly pale. It was indeed extremely difficult for him to fight against a Lotus warrior. This battle was Sumo's most difficult battle. With a thought, the Lotus Vine and the Kuan Soul Blade flew out at the same time. The Kuan Soul Blade went straight to the Silver Moon. The Lotus Vine instantly grew wildly. It directly formed a dense vine wall in front of Sumo. The vine wall was covered with blood-red roses. No cultivator in the venerable realm could have such a defense. At the same time, the yin-yang bell went straight to the head of the second swordsman. defending while attacking, attacking while defending. It could be said that Sumo had reached the pinnacle of what he could do. At the same time, Sumo's figure quickly retreated. Countless runes had already appeared all over her body. Those runes began to rapidly deduce, and in an instant, they had already become a sea. Forbidden Painting. That was currently the most powerful spell that Sumo could cast, and other spells were almost meaningless in front of a Lotus Warrior. Lianbua came out together, followed by spells. That scene made Wang Yu and Shun Ming in the distance gasp in amazement. In Wang Yu's heart, Xiao Luo was far inferior to her brother Amu. However, the scene at this moment made her feel that her brother was probably at this level back then. Of course, Sumo did not have the 9 coffins. At this time, the second swordsman also nodded secretly. Sumo's response had somewhat exceeded his imagination. However, that was far from enough. The second swordsman raised one hand. A vigorous lotus power directly blocked the yin-yang bell from the stars. The yin-yang bell kept spinning, but it could not set off sound waves. It was like the absolute power of a Lotus Warrior. At the same time, boom, crack, the moment the Kuan Soul Saber's blade light touched the silver moon sword light, it instantly dimmed. The Kuan Soul Saber was sent flying. Under Sumo's control, it still couldn't compete with Lotus Lianbua. However, the silver moon sword ray also paused for a moment as a portion of its power was dissipated. Bang! The remaining sword gleams were blocked by the lotus vines. Looking again, the wall of lotuses and vines had been pushed out more than 1,000 feet. Wherever the sword light passed, all the blood roses were destroyed. The petals fell like rain, leaving a trail of red. At the center of the wall of lotus vines, there was a protrusion that was hundreds of feet wide. Fortunately, it managed to block the sword. However, Sumo's face had turned even paler. He cultivated the white, bone, unwithered art, but at this moment he found it hard to sustain his immortal power. This was something that had never happened before. Hee. The second swordsman smirked. Demon King, you're not bad. However, this is far from enough. Kill. A cold light flashed in the eyes of the second swordsman. Unbeknownst to anyone, his second sword had already appeared. That sword did not go to the front of Sumo. Instead, it suddenly appeared behind Sumo. Everyone, whether it was Wang Yu, Shun Ming, or Sumo herself, did not understand. Why did another sword gleam appear behind Sumo? The silver moon sword was clearly in front of Sumo. Moreover, the sword behind it was black. It was like a shadow of the silver moon sword, but also like a ghost. Chi. Between the stars, the black electric arc was like a swimming snake. It went straight to the center of Sumo's back. This was the secret of the second swordsman. There were actually 2 silver moon swords, one yin and one yang. Under normal circumstances, there were not many cultivators who could block his sword. If the first sword succeeded, there was no need for a second sword. But if the first sword missed, the second swordsman's yin sword would appear from the opposite direction, directly killing the opponent. And almost all the Lotus Warriors who were slashed by the second swordsman died under his yin sword. Demon King. The combined bodies of Wang Yu and Shun Ming shouted. However, they did not have the ability to rescue Sumo. Puff! In the distance, they saw the black sword directly penetrate the center of Sumo's back. Boom! Above the stars, colorful lights scattered in all directions, like a gorgeous firework. The sea of forbidden maps under Sumo's feet actually shattered in an instant. The expressions of Wang Yu and Shun Ming suddenly changed. They moved and were about to rush up. However, at this time, the second swordsman suddenly raised his eyebrows, because he did not feel the aura of death. That sword just now seemed a little strange. He did not stab Sumo at all, and at this time, he suddenly felt a power suddenly appear behind him. Between the stars, Sumo actually took a step forward. At this time, Sumo's white robe was already torn, and there were traces of blood at the corner of his mouth. However, a cold light shot out from his eyes, and he held the Kuan soul blade with both hands. Just now, he used the restriction of time, and combined it with the magical steps. It actually had a miraculous effect. Under the lotus power, he could actually shuttle through. Slash! Endless blade, rays descended from the sky, heading straight for the back of the second swordsman's head. Wang Yu and Shun Ming were shocked, and their expressions turned from worry to joy. But the second swordsman's heart tightened. Supreme Lotus Technique. The Demon King of the Three Realms had actually mastered the space-time Lotus Technique. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to escape from his hidden sword. It should be known that even ordinary Lotus warriors would not be able to use that kind of space-time Lotus Technique. He could actually kill him? This was absolutely unexpected for the second swordsman. However, he was a Lotus warrior after all. The moment his mind was alerted, a lotus flower had already appeared behind him. The celestial lotus protected the body. That was a realm that the current sumo could not reach. It was almost the instinct of a lotus warrior. Once the celestial lotus appeared, it was as if a world had descended. The lotus was there, and the person was there, because the Tao lotus was the manifestation of their lotus heart. Boom! Sumo used almost all of his strength for this slash, because he knew that there would not be many opportunities for him to slash like this. Therefore, he almost drained his Dan Si to slash down with this slash. The Kuan Soul Blade could break worlds. This was currently the greatest power that Sumo could unleash with the Kuan Soul Blade. At this time, if the Five Poison Realm was not destroyed, it would collapse again. With a loud boom, the entire starry sky seemed to be lifted up. Looking again, the Kuan Soul Blade had split the lotus in half, and it was rapidly withering. Sumo swept across the starry sky like a giant comet. However, he did not have the chance to rush behind the second swordsman. The endless resistance caused his blade rays to suddenly dim. Although the lotus was split and withered, its vast power rebounded. Bang! Boom! In an instant, Sumo was like a kite with a broken string, directly bouncing dozens of miles away. In the void, he drew a long and narrow arc. At this time, the second swordsman had already turned around. His gaze was biting cold, and blood seeped from the corner of his mouth. In fact, he could not remember how many tens of thousands of years had passed since the last time he was injured. In the entire Izong world, the number of people that could injure him could be counted on one hand. That lotus was the manifestation of his lotus heart. Now that the lotus was broken, he was naturally injured. Sumo could actually break his lotus? Silver Moon Unity. The second swordsman's eyebrows twitched, and he let out a long howl. His voice shook the entire Glaze world's white South Star region. Looking again, two sword rays, one silver and one black, intertwined like two vast dragons, rushed through everything and headed straight for Sumo. Chapter 998. Silver Moon Fusion. The second swordsman unleashed his ultimate killer move. Before this, he never expected Sumo to be able to injure him. He never expected Sumo to force him to choose Silver Moon Fusion. Yin and Yang. The two Silver Moon swords were the two extremes of lightning. They intertwined with each other and flew towards Sumo with the rumbling of thunder. Hua! The galaxy was empty, because the previous battle had cleared out all the dust in the galaxy. At this moment, other than the black hole in the center of the Five Poisons world, there was nothing else. But even in this empty galaxy, the Silver Moon swords still created a raging tide. At that moment, the Five Poisons world was like a dried-up riverbed. Although there were many cracks, dust was still swept up. Killing intent filled the air. Hurricanes surged. Actually, Sumo was sent flying by the Lotus power. But the Silver Moon swords reached her first. Its speed was unfathomable. Sumo saw the sword gleam. But now, they did not have much power to resist. The sword gleam flew over. The forbidden map on Sumo could no longer be deduced. Just now, in order to block the sword, he had already activated the space-time forbidden map. Now, he had no more techniques to use. But he still had Lianbua. Whoosh! A ray of golden light flew out from his cosmos sac. A broken copper bowl suddenly flew out. Then, it expanded with the wind and instantly turned into a huge cauldron that was hundreds of feet in size. Lianbua? At that moment, the second swordsman was speechless. How many pieces of Lianbua did the Demon King of the Three Realms have? He knew that Madame Scorpion had given her 2 pieces of Lianbua to Sumo before she died. At that time, the second swordsman did not think much of it, because the newly obtained Lianbua might not be of use to Sumo. But now, the second swordsman was worried, because Sumo had already used 4 pieces of Lianbua. In theory, it wasn't something that an Exalt Realm cultivator could accomplish at all. But it happened to Sumo. Boom! However, there was no time for the swordsman to think. The tip of the Silver Moon sword had already hit the Soul Depository Cauldron. Fortunately, the Silver Moon sword did not disappoint the second swordsman. Although the Soul Depository Cauldron was a Lianbua, it was not a pure defensive artifact. Sumo had no choice but to hurriedly take it out. However, how could it possibly block the Silver Moon Immortal Sword? Boom! Clang! Hum! The sword radiance in front of the Silver Moon Immortal Sword dimmed slightly. The Soul Depository Cauldron was sent flying. Although Sumo still had Lianbua, it was too late to use it. The Yin-Yang Silver Moon was already in front of him. The red flowers scattered and the forbidden diagram shattered. All of Sumo's defenses collapsed at the last moment. The Silver Moon Sword light was unstoppable. This time, Sumo didn't even have the chance to choose a Lianbua to self-destruct. Wang Yu and Shun Ming couldn't even scream. Everything happened in an instant. Sumo didn't have any chance at all. That was the absolute gap between their realms. Even Lianbua couldn't make up for it. Boom! Crack between the stars. Only a loud noise was heard. This time, it was completely different from the previous one. The black and white light rose to the sky. The Silver Moon sword let out an invincible dragon's roar. The second swordsman's frown was slightly relieved, because this time he had definitely stabbed Sumo. The light dispersed. Looking again, there was a corpse floating in the void of the stars. The Silver Moon sword directly pierced through Sumo's body. Sumo, dressed in white, floated motionless in the void, his long ink-like hair hanging straight down. His aura seemed to have completely disappeared. Demon King, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming's voices were trembling, because they really couldn't believe that this scene was real. Sumo's death meant that the dream of reviving the galaxy was completely shattered. Silver Moon, we can finally go home. The second swordsman heaved a long sigh. He looked at the scene in front of him without much joy. Instead, there was a trace of loneliness in his eyes. He had no grudge against the Demon King of the Three Realms. But killing was his mission. He was born to kill, because he was an assassin trained by the Black Blind Swordsman. In fact, Li Mu had long been tired of killing. But how difficult was it for him to be free? The tree longed for peace, but the wind never stopped. The Black Blind Swordsman would never let him go so easily, because the Black and White Swordsman was too valuable. Moreover, he was the second swordsman. Li Mu had mentioned many times that he wanted to retire, but the Black Blind Swordsman wouldn't agree. In the end, when he killed the 7th Lotus Warrior, the Black Blind Swordsman finally agreed to use the Silverfish token 3 more times. Once the 3rd Silverfish mission was completed, he would be set free, and Sumo would be his 3rd Silverfish mission. In the last 1,000,000 years, the second swordsman had been yearning to stop killing, because he had killed too many people. Today, he could finally do it. Countless times before, he had fantasized about the ecstasy and relief of completing the last Silverfish mission. But now that it was done, his heart was at peace. He even felt guilty and apologetic as he looked at Sumo's corpse. "I'm sorry, Demon King." The second swordsman shook his head helplessly at Sumo's corpse. "If you don't die, I won't be free. Between you and me, I can only choose myself. I hope that you can still be reincarnated." Explode. Li Mu raised an eyebrow and bellowed. With that, he retracted the Silver Moon sword. At the same time, he would completely vaporize Sumo's corpse. It seemed that the Demon King of the Three Realms was destined to perish among the stars. Wang Yu and Shun Ming's fused bodies trembled slightly. They didn't want to believe it. But then, Li Mu's jaw dropped and his face drained of color. Bang! Whoosh! Following the second swordsman's bellow, there was a loud noise. But it wasn't Sumo's corpse that shattered, but his silver moon sword. Liam was shattered like a star. In that moment, the starry sky shone with a myriad of lights. At the same time, Sumo's body floated upright. The fragments of the silver moon sword glittered around him. Sumo's eyes were closed, but his face was as white as a sheet. He seemed to have one foot in the door of death, the other still outside. However, he was surrounded by stars. He was like a sleeping prince. Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming stared blankly at the scene. They didn't know if Sumo was dead or alive. The second swordsman, Li Mu's eyes were filled with terror. What kind of power could shatter the silver moon he had cultivated for tens of thousands of years? Not even a high-level Lotus Knight could do it. And at this moment, outside the Five Poisons realm, and even outside the Lazuli realm and Izong realm, many forces were looking here. Because this place was emitting a power that didn't belong to this world. The Battle of the Lotus Knights had touched some taboos. Several unknown places cast their gazes toward the White South Star region of Lazuli. Previously, the destruction of the Five Poisons realm didn't cause any disturbance. But this moment was different. The silver moon shattered. Sumo's body suddenly glowed with endless white light. That halo covered everything, and his wounds healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. And a white token floated in front of him. Chapter 999. White Mountain Decree. Not more than 3 inches long, not more than 3 fingers wide. Pure white as jade, but without a single word. On the token was a landscape painting with mountains, rivers, and villages. Above the sea, white lotuses near, white mountains far away. At that moment, everything in the galaxy seemed to stop. The second-ranked swordsman Li Mu's expression was extremely ugly. Because as a Lotus Knight, he recognized that token. Why would the White Mountain Decree be on Sumo's body? Why would he have the White Mountain Decree on him? Envoy of White Mountain. A thought flashed through Li Mu's mind, but he instantly rejected it. Because if Sumo was the envoy of White Mountain, then Li Mu would have been killed long ago. He, a peak of the second tier of Lotus Knight, did not have the qualifications to act against the envoy of White Mountain. He would be killed in an instant. Wang Yu and Shun Ming stared blankly at everything. They had never seen the White Mountain Decree. Once, in the Wisdom Realm, when Sumo had fought against Lucidum, this White Mountain Decree had saved Sumo once, but they had not been present at the time. And now, Sumo's wound had completely healed. His face began to turn from white to red. Just now, Sumo was not breathing, but now his chest began to rise and fall slightly. At that moment, whether it was Li Mu, Wang Yu, or Shun Ming, they all once again felt Sumo's existence. Sumo was awakening. And right now, for Sumo, it was a great dream. In the moment that the Silver Moon's celestial sword was about to pierce through Sumo, Sumo's heart was filled with unwillingness. Because he had not become a Lotus Knight, he had not awakened Wu Air, he had not saved AMU, he had not recovered the galaxy. There were still many, many things he needed to do. But he did his best. In reality, he still had the 5-colored lotus that Li Shui had given him. That could instantly give him the battle power of a 5th-tier Lotus Knight. But Sumo had his pride. Sumo. That 5-colored lotus, unless he needed to save AMU, he would not use it, even if it meant death. Puff! Sumo heard the sound of the Silver Moon immortal sword piercing through his body, and then he felt his soul start to float away. That was not an involuntary departure of his soul, but a forced one. However, Sumo felt that her soul had not dissipated. Everything around him disappeared. At that moment, there was no smoke and dust in the 5 Poisons world in his eyes, no second swordsman, no Wang Yu, and no Shin Ming. In front of him was a huge white mountain. White Mountain! Sumo's heart skipped a beat. That was because he had seen this white mountain a long time ago. However, this was the first time he was so close to it. Between him and White Mountain, there was no sea, no lotus. He seemed to be standing at the foot of White Mountain. White Mountain was very tall, but Sumo couldn't see its peak even when she raised her head. There seemed to be a mountain gate in front of him, but that mountain gate was shrouded in immortal mist. There seemed to be words on the lintel of the door, but Sumo couldn't see what they were. At that moment, all of his divine sense was useless, and he was like a mortal standing in front of the gate of immortality. On both sides of the mountain gate, there were 2 stone steels. They were very simple and unadorned, but one of them was about 3 zhang tall. The other was neatly cut at the waist, as if it was cut by a sharp blade. Strangely, there were no words on the 2 stone steels. However, Sumo suddenly felt that the half of the stone steel was somewhat familiar. 5 poisons divine steel. Sumo frowned. The 5 poisons divine steel that Madame Scorpion gave him before seemed to be the half of the steel that was cut off. Sumo really wanted to take out the 5 poisons divine steel to take a look. However, when he thought about it, the cosmos sack on him did not react at all. At this moment, he realized that he was a wandering soul. In theory, he should be dead. Sumo looked back again. Behind him was a vast and boundless sea. The waves were constantly crashing against the foot of the mountain. Strangely, Sumo didn't hear any sound. His current location was halfway up the mountain. Looking at the depths of the sea, he could see many lotus flowers. They were like small islands. The current Sumo already knew that every lotus flower was like a galaxy, a hidden world. White Mountain. Sumo was finally at the top of White Mountain. Turning around, Sumo looked at the mountain path leading to the mountain gate. They were all man-made and looked as smooth as a mirror. At the same time, they emitted a faint white mist. Sumo walked up the steps. From where Sumo stood to the mountain gate, there were a total of 49 steps. Sumo walked up step by step. From what he saw, he was already climbing up continuously. However, after 7 or 8 steps, Sumo couldn't help but frown, because he suddenly realized that there were still 49 steps in front of him. Sumo couldn't help but turn back again. The scenery behind him was exactly the same as before. He actually did not move from his original position. Sumo was slightly startled. He looked at the mountain gate and walked up again. This time, Sumo walked 49 steps. However, the number of steps in front of him did not change at all. He was still standing in place. However, in Sumo's perception, he did walk up 49 steps. Illusion? Sumo stopped and looked at the mountain with a sigh. At that moment, he understood that he would never be able to climb this white mountain. However, he also felt that everything around him was real. That should not be an illusion. This was definitely a magical world. Sumo stopped, and then he wanted to walk back. There was still a path behind him. However, the result was the same as before. No matter how he walked, he did not move. At that moment, Sumo seemed to be sealed in a special time and space, unable to advance or retreat. He even used his mystical footwork to do so. Normally, 1 step was a world. However, he felt that he had taken a step, but he was still in the same place. Phew! Sumo let out a deep breath of turbid air. He felt a sense of powerlessness that he had never felt before. White Mountain. Everything in front of him was like a nightmare. He could not wake up, and he could not get out. And at this moment, the voices of 2 boys came. Those 2 voices were not heard by Sumo, because they seemed to be directly transmitted to Sumo's heart. Sumo could vaguely make out 2 indistinct silhouettes within a mountain gate. They were not tall. It should be 2 children. There's a person there? One of them said. The other boy also noticed Sumo. Who are you? The first boy's voice was filled with childishness, but it also carried a tone of seniority. I'm the demon king of the 3 realms, Sumo. Sumo was overjoyed and replied with a voice in his heart. The demon king of the 3 realms? Sumo? The 2 boys' voices were somewhat hesitant. Senior brother, have you heard of this name? The first boy asked. No. The other boy seemed to shake his head. The mortals of the lower realm are as numerous as ants. How would I know about the demon king of the 3 realms? I can't even count the realm lotuses. That's true. The first boy said, but why is he standing at our mountain gate? How would I know? The other boy said, how about we ask the ancestral master? The ancestral master doesn't have time to care about mortal matters. I think we should just send him away. He is neither human nor ghost nor soul. He definitely can't enter the mountain gate. All right, The first boy smiled. What realm, what monarch, your cultivation is not up to par. Go back. Sumo really wanted to ask. However, the illusory boy only waved his sleeves lightly. Phew. Sumo only felt the world change, and the wind blew everywhere. He was already completely unaware of everything. However, in an instant, he seemed to feel his wounds were healing bit by bit. He heard the sound of his own breathing. Chapter 1000. Breathe, breathe, breathe. Sometimes a person's breathing could be the most beautiful music. Right now, Sumo's breathing was exactly that. Wang Yu and Xun Ming's faces were filled with surprise. The second-ranked swordsman Li Mu's face was extremely solemn. The entire galaxy was eerily quiet. Only Sumo's breathing could be heard. The white mountain token, like a guardian, quietly floated in front of Sumo. At that moment, no one dared to approach Sumo. The white mountain token, the worlds avoided. Sumo also felt it. Even though he didn't open his eyes, he could feel everything. He returned to the 5 poison world. The trip to White Mountain just now was like a dream. But Sumo still couldn't move. There were no wounds on his body. In reality, the sword just now had pierced through his body, even hurting his immortal heart. But right now, Sumo was as good as new. But he couldn't move. Sumo felt like he didn't have any strength left in his body. His Dansi was locked by a mysterious power. This power was exactly the same as the one emitted by the illusory boy. And right now, above his Dansi, was the lotus seed that Madame Scorpion gave him. It was a real lotus seed, emitting a faint greenish-white light. Whoosh, whoosh. Right now, Sumo's Dansi was surging with waves, and there was an inexplicable wind coming from nowhere. Small waves became big waves became giant waves. Sumo could see that in just a few breaths, his Dansi was surging with monstrous waves. The lotus seed floated in the void of the Dansi, tens of thousands of feet high. Those waves, like a hurricane, rose up and headed straight for the lotus seed. But the lotus seed was motionless in the void. It was an extremely beautiful scene. Whoosh! The waves of Sumo's Dansi, layer by layer, finally landed on the lotus seed. In an instant, the lotus seed glowed brightly. Sumo understood that those waves were not real waves, but endless spiritual energy. They were nourishing the lotus seed. Bang! With a soft sound, the lotus seed exploded in an instant. Then, like falling stars, they scattered across the Dansi. Whoosh! 1,000 falling stars. The huge waves that were already tens of thousands of feet high suddenly turned into a heavy rain that poured down from the sky. At that moment, Sumo felt herself falling as well. With a boom, countless waves splashed in the Pill Sea. Subsequently, Sumo's entire Dansi shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. A whirlpool appeared in the center of the Dansi. The whirlpool spun faster and faster, and its depth grew deeper and deeper. It was like a bottomless black hole that wanted to swallow all the seawater. No one knew how long the process lasted. Sumo felt like she was sleeping and waking up and sleeping again. Above the Dansi, it was bright and dark and bright. It was as if the sun was rising and the moon was setting, an endless cycle of dawn and dusk. Time will always be like this. It could transform into an instant, or it could transform into 10,000 years. Because someone once said that time doesn't exist. In the end, Sumo's Dansi was reduced to the size of an abbot, and there was an incomparably deep black hole in it. Suemo felt a little thirsty, as if he was in a desert. His Dansi was about to dry up. At this moment, the black hole was no longer spinning. Sumo wanted to struggle because he was too sad. He wanted to drink some water. His entire person seemed to be about to be sucked dry. When would that black hole be filled? Chi. And at this moment, the black hole actually began to spray out lines of water. At first, there were only a few strands, but they gradually became streams. Gurgle, gurgle. The water became a spring, and then it kept surging up, layer after layer, stacked on top of each other. The spring water gushed out in all directions. It covered the entire black hole. The The black hole was gone, and there was only a spring with a green light. Moreover, the spring kept rising, and in the end, it reached a total of 49 layers, 49 feet. At the same time, Sumo's dance was recovering. At that moment, Sumo finally woke up. The hunger and thirst just now gradually subsided. Boom! Splash! Suddenly, a ball of green light leaped up from the spring water, directly rising to a height of 3 feet. Then it began to germinate, spread its leaves, whip, and bud. It was a new lotus. Sumo's heart suddenly trembled, because at that moment he suddenly felt as if his entire body had been reborn. That lotus belonged to him. The lotus grew rapidly. In just a moment, it had already begun to bloom. In an instant, tens of thousands of rays of light shone on the entire dance. Sumo's dance began to expand at an unprecedented speed. The waves and tides seemed to have opened up a new world. The lotus vines swayed, emitting bursts of delicate fragrance. Endless fragrance wafted over the sea. Sumo had smelled that fragrance before. His dance seemed to be forming a new perfume sea. Lotuses grew on the sea, and lotuses adorned the sea. It was an incomparably magnificent existence. Then, endless lotus power began to directly pour into Sumo's limbs and bones. Bones refining, marrow cleansing, spirit concentration. In fact, all of these were experiences that Sumo had experienced before. But this time, it was completely different. Sumo seemed to have stepped through a door and entered a completely different world. That feeling was indescribable and indescribable. To be precise, all of Sumo's previous cultivation was an awakening, because, originally, he was at the peak of the venerable realm. Cultivation in the Izong world was nothing new to him. He was just walking the same path again, but it was different this time. Now, he finally achieved a qualitative leap. Lotus Realm. That was the realm above the venerable realm that the venerables spoke of in the 3 realms. It was the realm that Sumo had dreamed of when he learned of the existence of lotus scholars in the Izong world. At that moment, Sumo's heart and body were suddenly enlightened. At this time, Sumo did not know how much time had passed, but in the eyes of Li Mu, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming, it was actually only a moment. The White Mountain token had been emitting a dazzling light. The white light shone on Sumo's body. They did not know what exactly happened to Sumo's body, but they could vaguely feel that Sumo had changed, because at this time, the void around Sumo was shrouded by a layer of indistinct water vapor. Everything around him had undergone a special change. Lotus Chi. The second swordsman, Li Mu, looked at the light and water vapor around Sumo and smiled bitterly. He could not explain why, because there was still a long way to go from the peak of the venerable realm to the lotus realm. Even if Sumo had the lotus seed, it was impossible for him to change. But he knew that Sumo had transformed into a lotus. Demon King, you are indeed a person of great fortune. Li Mu let out a long sigh. Some things and some people were special existences of this vast universe. In fact, at that moment, Li Mu still had a chance to escape. But he did not choose to leave. The black and white swordsman had his own beliefs. He was an assassin and a swordsman. As long as the sword existed, he existed. If the sword died, he died. Whoosh! At this time, Sumo had already opened his eyes. A beam of light appeared directly above his head. The light shot straight into the starry sky. A lotus phantom appeared in the starry sky, and the entire glazed white south star field could see that phantom. Whoosh! When they looked again, Sumo's figure suddenly moved. The Kuan Soul Saber was already in his hand. The current Kuan Soul Saber was definitely different from before. The saber light soared, and the white flame was at least 100 feet. Slash! Sumo held the saber with one hand and slashed at the swordsman, Li Mu. At that moment, Li Mu did not dodge. Because he did not kill Sumo, the moment the Silver Moon immortal sword shattered, his life would lose meaning. Li Mu smiled and waited for death. He knew that he would die without a doubt. Puff! Sumo did not show any mercy, because this person had already killed him once. Li Mu was directly slashed in half, and instantly scattered into the starry sky. Sigh. At this moment, a sorrowful sigh came from within vast universe. Chapter 1001. Life was long. Death was but an instant. The second-rank swordsman, Li Mu, had cultivated for millions of years. From a child cultivator to a lotus knight, it was a process that he dared not look back on lightly. Many memories were already blurred. Many things were already forgotten. However, in the moment of his death, Li Mu had no regrets, because he longed for the future, but was also prepared to die at any moment. Who asked him to be a killer? But when a person died, there would always be people who shed tears, or at least sighed. A black-robed cultivator stood on the outskirts of the glazed world's binance starfield. His figure was slender and tall. In the vast universe, he stood alone in the void, looking especially small and lonely. His eye sockets were empty. He was blind, the black-blind monk. He had seen everything just now. Even if he had no eyes, his heart was not blind. Li Mu was one of his trump cards. To tell the truth, although the black-blind monk was somewhat mentally prepared, he still couldn't believe it when Sumo transformed into a lotus and Li Mu died. Sumo had killed Li Mu, who was at the peak of the second Lotus Knight realm. Li Mu hadn't completed the last silverfish token. The black-blind monk knew what Li Mu was thinking. He was willing to give Li Mu his final freedom. However, all of this was impossible. Mu'er, the black-blind monk sighed deeply. Unfortunately, his eye sockets were empty. He couldn't shed tears. Mu'er, I'm sorry, the black-blind monk said gravely. There were a total of 13 black and white swordsmen. Now, nearly half of them had died at Sumo's hands. Apart from the first-rank swordsman, he could no longer send out black and white swordsmen. But Sumo transforming into a lotus was the last thing he wanted to see. That was the Heartless King's bottom line, the White Mountain token. This variable was indeed not within the black-blind monk's calculations, nor was it within the Heartless King's plans. Because White Mountain didn't care about the world devouring. But everything that had happened to Sumo must have had something to do with White Mountain. The black-blind monk's footsteps paused. Then he headed straight for the glazed world's binance starfield. The black-blind monk didn't seem to use any formations. He had already entered the binance starfield with one step. He was ready to act himself, because they couldn't wait any longer. Sumo's lotus form had truly ignited the flames of recovery for the three realms and the Milky Way. It was no longer a single spark, but a vast grassland that was set ablaze. If this fire was not extinguished, then there was no way to purify it. If Sumo were to find AMU, then these two lotus souls would definitely allow the three realms galaxy to be reborn. If that happened, all their efforts would be in vain. Therefore, while Sumo's condition was not stable, the black-blind master had to take a risk out of desperation. As long as Sumo died, everything else would be easy to handle. Thus, the black-blind grandmaster wanted to go straight to the five-poison world. However, as soon as he entered the glazed white South Star territory, he was blocked by a crescent moon. The crescent moon was like a hook hanging in the starry sky. The black-blind warrior couldn't help but raise his brows, because the entire glazed white Southern Star region star chart was in his heart. There weren't any stars on the path he took. However, in the distance, a crescent moon abruptly appeared on his path. It blocked his path of advance. Black-blind Hercules stopped in his tracks and turned around. He wanted to change his route. However, as soon as he took a step, the crescent moon from just now appeared in his new direction. The black-blind warrior didn't turn around this time. Instead, he smiled politely and said, "Which expert is blocking this one's path? If it is possible, please be magnanimous. This one will pass by and will not disturb the peace of the glazed white world." The black-blind warrior's words were very polite, because he didn't want to complicate matters. However, the crescent moon didn't answer him at all. The black-blind warrior raised his head. His empty eye sockets suddenly emitted a black light. It was like two black pupils suddenly appeared. However, he couldn't help but turn his head, because in the world of his perception, that crescent moon actually reflected back an extremely blinding light. Those two beams of light nearly injured his divine soul. The black-blind warrior's expression changed. At the same time, his voice suddenly turned cold. If you don't show yourself, then this one will force his way through. Whoosh! The black-blind warrior's black clothes flapped, and he looked like a huge black bat. Thousands of black winds suddenly swirled under his armpits. The black winds howled, and like a black storm that appeared in the universe, it swept towards the crescent moon. The black-blind warrior was a Lotus Scholar level 7. In the entire Ezong world, there weren't many cultivators that could compete with him. Even Lucidum and Immortal Lotus of the Sanskrit world together weren't his match. And the black-blind warrior already couldn't remember how long it had been since he last fought. This time, if the situation wasn't urgent, he wouldn't have personally made a move. Whoosh! The black wind could definitely shatter stars. If this black wind blew on the Five Poisons world before, it could directly blow away all the stars in the Five Poisons world. One wind could destroy an entire world. The black-blind warrior's methods could be said to be all-knowing. Therefore, according to the black-blind warrior's thinking, unless he didn't make a move, as long as he made a move, then nothing could stop him. However, an accident occurred. His black wind blew in front of the crescent moon, but it didn't shake the crescent moon. Instead, it gradually dissipated. This was the third time the black-blind warrior exclaimed in surprise. Originally, he was prepared to follow the black wind straight to the Five Poisons world. However, his black wind didn't work. This could be said to be a situation that he had never encountered before. F.A. Lotus King Realm? The black-blind warrior couldn't help but inwardly suck in a breath of cold air. However, he immediately calmed down, because that was simply impossible. In the Ezong world, it was absolutely impossible for two F.A. Lotus King Realm cultivators to appear, because that was the law of vast universe. But the black-blind warrior suddenly thought of a possibility, and his expression couldn't help but change once again. This time, the change was even more serious than before. Moreover, the black-blind warrior didn't make another move. Heaven hooked like the moon. At this time, he finally thought of a person. Black-blind, I didn't know that Mr. Run had arrived. The black-blind warrior cupped his fists towards the void and coldly said, My apologies, my apologies. Hee. When he looked again, an image appeared in the void. In the image, a cultivator appeared. He was wearing cloth clothes and a conical bamboo hat. He was barefoot, holding a fishing rod. That was the East Fence Village's Mr. Run. However, that was only an image, not his real body. Warrior, I trust you have been well. With the conical bamboo hat covering half of his face, Mr. Wren smiled lightly. Thanks to Mr. Run, I have been well, the black-blind warrior said. However, Mr. Wren, why are you blocking my way instead of fishing at the observation lake? I remember that you can't leave the town. Warrior, don't talk nonsense. Mr. Wren laughed. I didn't leave the town. Right now, I'm at the observation lake, not daring slack off. Mr. Wren, let's not beat around the bush. You are the multi-realm enforcer. My attack is ineffective against you. However, why do you care about this Ezong world and use the heaven hook to block my way? Warrior, hee. Mr. Run was silent for a moment. Actually, I was saving you. Because if I didn't block you, I'm afraid that the other people in the town would have come down to look for you. They don't care about their lives. Chapter 1002. The rest of the town wants to come down? Hearing Mr. Wren's words, Black-Blind Taoist could not help but frown. This was because he used to be in Luofan Town. Those who could have a place in Luofan Town were all powerful people. However, the people of the town absolutely could not leave the town casually. Mr. Wren's identity was that of a law enforcer. Even he could not leave the village casually, let alone other cultivators. Thinking of this, Black-Blind Taoist could not help but sneer. Mr. Wren, you actually dare to say such a lie if you want to stop me? Which village cultivator of Luofan Town will come down? Galaxy Village? Black-Blind Taoist shook his head. Galaxy Village is still too young. Ezong had an agreement with the Galaxy Village cultivators. They would not dare to easily leave the village. Taking a step back, Galaxy Village has some amazing people, but they are not enough to control the overall situation. Even if they come, I, Black Blind Taoist, am not afraid. Hearing this, Mr. Rin could not help but shake his head. Taoist, if the people of Galaxy Village want to come, I really will not stop you, because most likely they will still let you live. However, I'm not talking about the people of Galaxy Village. Oh, Black Blind Taoist raised his eyebrows. His empty eye sockets seemed to slightly narrow. There are not many villages in the town. The people of East Border Village should not find trouble with me. The two old ancestors of Broken Sleeve Village also do not have the leisure to do that. There are also a few deserted villages. Deserted villages? Hee hee. Mr. Rin laughed. Taoist, you really have not returned to the town for too long. Some deserted villages are no longer deserted villages. What do you mean? Black Blind Taoist asked. The people of Windwheel Village have already reincarnated and returned. Mr. Rin said, Windwheel lineage? Black Blind Taoist's voice was somewhat strange, because he knew what the Windwheel lineage meant and what kind of people the Windwheel lineage was. How do they complete it? You should know that their Windwheel lineage is missing one person. The Black Blind Great Scholar asked. Back then, the entire Windwheel lineage was reincarnated. They didn't even leave a single guide behind. In the past, we all thought that they were suicidal, descending to the lower realms. Hee hee, young Masterin said. I don't know exactly how they came back, but I don't know. However, it must be related to Sumo, because the person they lack is Sumo. Sumo is the youngest disciple of the Windwheel faction. This is what someone from the Windwheel faction told me personally. What? It was the first time that Black Blind Mountain knew about Sumo's identity. In this way, the Windwheel Village would definitely be one of the biggest obstacles for them to purify Izon. Windmill by Yifeng asked me to pass a message to you. If the Black Lotus faction really dares to touch her junior brother, she will leave fallen mortal town and descend to the lower realm again. Great Scholar, you should understand what it means to descend again. By Yifeng, the Black Blind Great Scholar said these 3 words heavily. She is a lunatic. Doesn't she know what it means to descend? Also, Mr. Rin, your Easter Hedge faction is the law enforcer of various realms. How can you let her descend so casually? Baishan won't agree. Hee hee, Mr. Rin laughed. Great Scholar, the Windwheel faction is originally a bunch of lunatics. Otherwise, why would the entire village commit suicide and descend to the lower realm? Bai Yifeng will do what she said. She is a descender and isn't considered scary. However, if the entire Windwheel faction descend to the lower realm, it won't be easy to clean up. Our Easter Hedge faction may not be able to stop them. Don't forget, the Windwheel faction was said to be the closest existence to Baishan. Baishan's attitude towards the Windwheel faction has always been somewhat unfathomable. So, I said that I stopped you today to save you. Am I wrong? It's me now. If Bai Yifeng comes, I'm afraid the entire Glaze world won't be able to survive. He, Black Blind Scholar, laughed coldly. Mr. Rin, no matter how powerful the Windwheel faction is, it's impossible for him to observe the various realms all the time. Those who have such ability are all your Eastern Hedge faction's people. So, don't say that you're helping me. You're helping the Windwheel faction. I don't believe that the Windwheel faction can let him be reborn after I kill Sumo. The Windwheel faction can't. Mr. Rin laughed lightly. But it doesn't mean that Baishan can't. Didn't the number 2 swordsman kill Sumo just now? But what's the result? Once the Baishan token is used, Sumo can't be killed at all. Great Scholar, judge the situation. You should understand that Sumo can't be killed. Black Blind Scholar didn't speak. Also, Mr. Rin continued, I didn't help the Windwheel faction. I only helped Bai Yifeng. Oh, hearing this, Black Blind Scholar couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Then, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. Ha ha, ha. Black Blind Scholar knew that the Eastern Hedge law enforcers were all great loners. He absolutely didn't expect that Mr. Rin, the most indifferent person in the Eastern Hedge faction, would actually say those words just now. At the same time, these words were enough to explain Mr. Rin's position. Black Blind Scholar understood that no matter what, he couldn't kill Sumo today, because he couldn't get through Mr. Run, not to mention the fact that Sumo had the support of the Windwheel faction. Congratulations, Mr. Run. You may have a chance to obtain the true method. Black Blind Scholar cupped his hands towards Mr. Run and then turned around. However, he still listened to the footsteps and said coldly, Mr. Run, the heartless Dharmaraja won't give up. If he can leave the town, then he has the ability to return to the town. Even if it ends up in the White Mountain, we will fight with all our strength. Huh, Mr. Rin nodded. Luo Fan Town, we await your arrival at any time. Black Blind Scholar didn't say anything else. He took a step and directly left the glazed white South Star region, disappearing without a trace. Alas, Mr. Run raised his bamboo hat. His eyes were clear and complicated. Mr. Run looked in the direction where Black Blind Scholar disappeared and let out a long sigh. Scholar, I'm afraid that the heavenly change is coming. Take care of yourself. The 5-poison star boundary no longer existed. Sumo killed swordsman Li Mu with one slash and then looked around. Whoosh, the combined bodies of Wang Yu and Shun Ming suddenly separated. They moved at the same time and appeared in front of Sumo. Sumo, Demon King, I'm fine. Sumo smiled faintly. This is a blessing in disguise. If not for Madame Scorpion's lotus seed, I probably wouldn't have been able to become a lotus knight so quickly. Wang Yu and Shun Ming nodded. Unfortunately, the 5 poisons realm, Madame Scorpion, Green Snake, and the others had all turned into dust in the vast universe. They had existed in this world and left behind stories. Perhaps this was the process of life. What was once the 5 poisons realm was only a black hole. Sumo, what should we do next? Wang Yu asked. According to the original plan, go to the Southern Abyss Sea and then look for AMU. Sumo said. Okay. Wang Yu and Shun Ming nodded. They had already searched the 13 dark worlds on the way to the Southern Abyss Sea marked on Murong Haiching's star map. Therefore, they did not stay in the galaxy for long. The 3 of them disappeared and went straight to the Southern Abyss Sea. Not long after they left, a man dressed in earthen yellow clothes gradually appeared in the interstellar space. He was tall and slender. He wore a pair of wooden clogs on his feet and a wooden ruler on his waist. He also wore a wooden mask on his face. The pattern on the mask was that of a ferocious beast. The masked man looked in the direction where Sumo and the others disappeared but did not say anything. Then he took out the ruler on his waist and pointed at the black hole in the 5 poisons realm. Whoosh! The black hole disappeared in an instant. End of volume. Chapter 1003. The Southern Abyss Sea was located in the center of the glazed white South Star region. According to the star map, Sumo, Wang Yu, and Shun Ming had already arrived at the interstellar space marked on the map. On the star map, the Southern Abyss Sea was a world of its own. There were no small worlds in the surrounding interstellar space. Jiguang star map and Murong Haiching star map were completely the same in the Southern Abyss Sea's position. However, neither Sumo, Wang Yu, nor Shun Ming saw the so-called Southern Abyss Sea. They knew that the so-called sea might not be a sea in the interstellar space. However, the demon eye and ghost eye were activated at the same time. All they could see was the vast starry sky. There were no stars or celestial forms. This interstellar space seemed to be completely empty. Sumo, there seems to be nothing here. Wang Yu frowned. Yes. Sumo nodded. Demon King, didn't you say that only Lotus Warriors can be seen in the Southern Abyss Sea? Now that you're a Lotus Warrior, why don't you see the Southern Abyss Sea? Shun Ming asked. I can't say for sure now. Let's observe for a while more. Maybe we'll find something, Sumo said. Yes. Wang Yu and Shun Ming both nodded. In fact, even if Wang Yu and Shun Ming were at the 9 levels of Rebirth Realm, they could spread their divine senses thousands of miles away. Now, the entire interstellar space was empty. There was nothing. However, they all believed that Ji Guang and Murong Haiching's map could not be wrong. Otherwise, why would the Southern Abyss Sea be marked at the same time? It could only be said that this was a special place. Unfortunately, The two star maps did not clearly state the characteristics of the Southern Abyss Sea. Therefore, Sumo and the other two decided to stay in this star region for a while. They walked for a few more days in the vast interstellar space, but they did not find anything special. However, as great cultivators, they were extremely patient. In the end, they each took out their Dharma treasures. Then they began to cultivate in this star region. What Sumo took out was naturally the lotus throne. Wang Yu took out a praying mat. It seemed that Wang Yu often meditated and cultivated. As soon as the prayer mat appeared, it expanded to a size of several hundred feet, resembling a floating continent. Shenming did not take out his Dharma treasure. She and Wang Yu sat back to back, cultivating and meditating. This was also the most common cultivation method the sisters used after they got together, because this way, they could take care of each other. Most importantly, they could fuse at the fastest speed and possess the strongest combat power. In the blink of an eye, 300 years had passed. Even though 100 years was nothing to Sumo and the others, it was nothing. However, they had stayed for a long time. However, they found nothing. Sis, could we have made a mistake? I don't see any changes in the surroundings at all. No matter how I look at it, there doesn't seem to be a sea of stars here. Shenming said. Wang Yu shook his head. I can't be wrong. Don't you think it's strange? We've rarely seen such a spacious and clean star region along the way. This star region is too pure, so pure that it's a bit abnormal. What do you think? Oh, Shenming tilted his head and pondered. Sis, now that you mention it, it seems so. There isn't even any interstellar dust here. We've been meditating for 300 years, but we haven't seen anything. That's right. So, there must be some special power here, Wang Yu said. Sumo naturally heard the sisters' conversation. However, Sumo sat cross-legged on the lotus throne and didn't say anything, because she was sensing a strange power rising in the distant starry sky. At this moment, the entire starry sky was extremely spacious and empty. The area Sumo had detected could contain dozens of small worlds. This was the area marked on the two star maps. It could be said that if the Southern Abyss Sea really existed, it would be an extremely vast existence. The stars were like small islands within it. In fact, Sumo and Wang Yu had the same opinion. They both firmly believed that the Southern Abyss Sea existed. It was just that they hadn't discovered it yet. Whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, Sumo's ears moved slightly, because he heard the strange sound of waves. Wang Yu, did you hear that? Sumo asked. What? Wang Yu looked at Sumo. The sound of waves, Sumo said, and looked in the direction of the sound. Now, Sumo was already in the first stage of the Lotus Realm. His magic eye could see through the entire Glaze Realm. However, he only heard the sound of waves, but didn't see any waves. I didn't hear anything. Wang Yu shook his head. I didn't hear anything either, Shenming said. At the same time, Wang Yu also looked in the direction that Sumo was looking at, but she also didn't see anything. Sumo nodded. He understood now. Back then, the Linen Fairy Lotus said that only Lotus warriors could see the Southern Abyss Sea, because the sound of waves was getting closer and closer, as if thousands of tides were rushing over. He could hear it clearly, but Wang Yu and Shenming couldn't even hear the sound. That was the difference caused by their realms. Demon King, did you see the Southern Abyss Sea? Shenming asked. Not yet, Sumo said, but I heard the sound of waves. It will be here soon. The Southern Abyss Sea seems to be a flowing sea. A flowing sea? Shenming frowned and thought to himself, is there still a sea that doesn't flow? However, Shenming immediately understood what Sumo meant. The flowing here meant that the entire Southern Abyss Sea existed in the vast universe. The Southern Abyss Sea wasn't fixed in the same star region. Of course, this was probably just Sumo's speculation, because this could explain why Sumo and the others didn't sense the Southern Abyss Sea previously. Whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, the sound of waves became clearer in Sumo's ears. At the same time, he finally saw a ray of white light in the galaxy. It appeared in front of Sumo on the left. That ray of light was like the boundary between the sea and the sky. At first, it was just a line. However, it gradually turned into endless white waves. That's right. The white waves were monstrous and swept over. They rumbled with the sound of rushing thunder. Sumo's eyes narrowed slightly. All of you, come up to my lotus platform. Sumo said to Wang Yu and Shun Ming. Hai Shui will be here soon. Wang Yu and Shun Ming didn't see Hai Shui, but they listened to Sumo. So, they put away the cattail hassock and went up to Sumo's lotus platform. As soon as they got on the lotus platform, they felt the lotus platform shake slightly. Wang Yu and Shun Ming were a little surprised. Hai Shui is here, Sumo said lightly. At this moment, in Sumo's eyes, the surrounding galaxy had completely turned into a boundless sea. Their lotus platform was like a lonely boat on the sea. At the same time, dense fog rose from the sea, suddenly making it look mysterious. At this moment, Sumo felt as if he was in a different world. He wasn't in the galaxy at all, but on a sea. Just when Sumo was a little surprised, there was suddenly a song coming from the depths of the sea. There seemed to be a small boat in the distance. Chapter 1004. Whether they saw it or not, the sea was there. In Sumo's eyes, she was surrounded by a vast and boundless sea. In Wang Yu and Shun Ming's eyes, they were surrounded by an empty and tranquil galaxy. It was the same world, but different senses existed. The various realms were so mysterious. Wang Yu and Shun Ming's eyes were filled with confusion, while Sumo's brows furrowed slightly. An ethereal song came from the depths of the sea, leisurely and leisurely. This body is tranquil and eternal. The light of wisdom untainted by dust covers the various realms. Formless and formless like empty clouds, flowers bloom in spring and leaves fall in autumn. Everything is like a bubble and shadow, following the wondrous voice of the saints. The legendary figures throughout the ages, today the grave of the bone forest, is deep. The sins of all living beings are deep and terrifying, bewildering the living and the dead. This body is hard to obtain. The wondrous voice is hard to hear. The present has heard. If this body is not measured towards this life, where should it be measured towards? The song sounded like Sanskrit, but also like a celestial tune. Sumo found it somewhat familiar, but she could not recall where she had heard it before. With the reincarnation of so many lifetimes, many of his memories were no longer clear. Sumo, what did you see? Wang Yu asked. The sea is misty, and there seems to be a boat in the distance, Sumo said. I also heard singing. Oh, Wang Yu frowned. Although she had the demonic eye, she could not see anything. Sister, our realms are still too low, Shen Ming muttered quietly. At this time, she naturally hoped that she could see and hear. Yes, Wang Yu nodded, then sighed. Who asked us to have a mental barrier? We can't break through to the supremacy realm. We only hope that we can find my brother, then we can all advance again. Shen Ming nodded helplessly and did not say anything else. At this time, Sumo had already seen it clearly. In the distance, there was indeed a small boat floating over. It was an ancient wooden boat, no more than 10 feet long, no more than 3 feet wide in the middle, and pointed at both ends. The entire boat was greenish-brown in color, and there were no oars. A green-robed man was sitting cross-legged on the ship. He wore a Xiao Yao scarf on his head and held a folding paper fan in his hand. He was dressed like a scholar. Lotus warrior. Sumo could confirm that the other party was a Lotus Knight, but she couldn't tell what stage he was at. The song just now was sung by the Lotus Scholar. The boat seemed to be on the sea, but when Sumo took a closer look, it was not. The boat was not on the sea at all. It was floating 3 feet above the sea. However, it floated up and down as if it was riding the wind and breaking the waves. At this time, the small boat was already relatively close. The scribe on the boat stopped singing and closed his paper fan. Then, he cupped his fist at Sumo and said with a smile, "Little brother, where are you from? Have you lost your way?" "Senior, is this the Nanyuan Sea?" Sumo asked in return. "That's right." The Lotus warrior nodded. "This is the Southern Abyss Sea. Senior, I am a cultivator from a hidden world. I once heard that the Southern Abyss Sea is called the Minor Samsara Sea. Here, you can find a trace of the Tao shadow of a cultivator whose Tao and soul were destroyed in a hidden world and bring their soul back. I wonder if it's true? Sumo said. Hee hee. When the Lotus Warrior heard Sumo's words, he unfolded his paper fan and smiled. Little brother, this Southern Abyss Sea is indeed called the Minor Samsara Sea. However, who told you that you can find the Tao shadow of a cultivator and bring their soul back here? Sumo was stunned. Senior, you mean that the Tao shadow is fabricated? In the myriad realms, what is real is fake, and what is fake is real. Whether the Tao shadow is fabricated or not, I can't make a conclusion. However, I have been wandering the myriad realms with the Samsara Sea for tens of thousands of years, but I have never seen a Tao shadow return, the Lotus Warrior said. Oh. When Sumo heard this, she hurriedly said, Senior, you mean that there are indeed cultivator Tao shadows in this Samsara Sea? Hee hee. The Lotus Warrior smiled and nodded. In the Southern Abyss Sea, there are indeed Tao shadows. However, those Tao shadows are like the moon in the water or a painting in the mirror. They're not real at all. Even if you see them, what can you do? All of them are fake illusions. Senior, didn't you just say that in the myriad realms, what is real is fake, and what is fake is real? Sumo smiled. In this Southern Abyss Sea, if we can really see the Tao shadow of a cultivator, it's not impossible to turn into a true soul and return. Oh. When the Lotus Warrior heard Sumo's words, he was slightly stunned and immediately smiled. Little brother, what you said makes sense. However, this Southern Abyss Sea is vast and boundless. Even for a Lotus Warrior, looking for a Tao shadow is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Senior, are you a Tibetan cultivator who often comes to the Southern Abyss Sea? Sumo asked. I am not a Tibetan cultivator. The Lotus Warrior smiled. I don't often come to the Southern Abyss Sea either, but I live in the Southern Abyss Sea. To me, the Southern Abyss Sea is like the Tibetan world to you. This is the place where I cultivate. Strictly speaking, the Southern Abyss Sea doesn't belong to the Tibetan world. Oh. Sumo was a little surprised and cupped her hands again. May I know your name, Senior? The Lotus Warrior shook his head. I'm just a small cultivator. I don't dare to have any name. Little brother, you can call me the Ferryman. Ferryman. Hearing this name, Sumo felt that the Lotus Warrior in front of her was not simple. Senior, you said that strictly speaking, the Southern Abyss Sea doesn't belong to the Tibetan world. What do you mean? Sumo asked again. Little brother, did you enter the Southern Abyss Sea in one go? The Lotus Warrior asked. I'm afraid you must have wandered in the Southern Abyss Galaxy within the Tibetan world for at least 300 years. That's right, Sumo said. I did wander in the galaxy for 300 years before I saw the Southern Abyss Sea. That's right. The Lotus Warrior nodded. Because the Southern Abyss Sea only has a tide in the Tibetan world every 300 years. And it will only appear in the Tibetan world when the tide is high. Normally, you won't be able to see it. Senior, are we still in the Tibetan world now? Sumo said. Not anymore. The Lotus Warrior said. Now, you are in the Southern Abyss Sea realm. This place can't be considered a Tibetan world. The Southern Abyss Sea realm is a flowing world. Because the Southern Abyss Sea is a flowing existence. It isn't a sea, but a mass of chi. It travels between the worlds with a special trajectory. Where the Southern Abyss is, it's the Southern Abyss. It's just that recently, it has overlapped with the Tibetan world more often. Therefore, many cultivators who have seen the Southern Abyss Sea think that there's a sea of stars in the Tibetan world named the Southern Abyss. I see, Sumo said. Thank you, Senior. I've learned a lot. It's not that I've learned a lot. The Lotus Warrior smiled at Sumo. It's fate that we met. I've been above the sea all day, and it's rare for me to see a person. How many years has it been since I last saw a human figure? And it was a girl in white. That girl is actually the same as you. She also heard that the sea of reincarnation can find Tao shadows, and came to bring people back from the dead. However, I'm very curious. She's not a Lotus Warrior, but she can actually see the Southern Abyss? The lotus warrior frowned. She's really a strange girl. Senior, does that girl in white have the nining body and has a cold aura all over her body? Sumo asked hurriedly. Chapter 1005. Samsara of the One Treasury will be updated later today, before midnight. Currently typing. Please wait a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1006. That's right. When the Lotus Ferryman heard this, he nodded. That white-clothed girl indeed has an extremely rare nining body. Her entire body is covered in cold mist. Do you know each other? We're old friends, Sumo said. Senior, do you know where that lady in white went? I'm not sure. The Lotus Ferryman shook his head. The Southern Abyss Sea is unpredictable. That lady came to the Southern Abyss Sea, saying that she was looking for her master's Tao Shadow. I don't know where she went, but she might still be in the Southern Abyss Sea. Thank you, Senior. Sumo frowned and nodded. It seemed that it was not easy to find Morong Haiching. Sumo could not see the end of the vast Southern Abyss Sea. Little brother, there is no danger in the Southern Abyss Sea. However, you have to be careful if you encounter some black holes and whirlpools. You came from Izong, so you have to return to Izong eventually. If you get lost, I'll give you a lotus leaf. If you want to leave this place, you just have to use your lotus power to catalyze this lotus leaf, and you can return to Izong directly. With that, the Lotus Ferryman took out a lotus leaf from his bosom and waved his hand. That leaf floated in front of Sumo. Thank you again, Senior. Sumo did not decline and took the lotus leaf. The Lotus Ferryman smiled faintly and added, Also, your two little friends must not leave your lotus platform. Otherwise, with their realm, their lives will be in danger. Remember. With that, the Lotus Ferryman waved his hand. Looking again, his small boat rose with the wind and floated into the distance. Sumo cupped her hands to send him off and expressed her gratitude again. Sumo, what happened just now? At this moment, Wang Yu and Shin Ming on the lotus platform asked. From her point of view, Sumo's soul seemed to have left her body as she stood stiffly on the lotus platform. At this moment, Sumo's eyes lit up. They did not know what happened just now. Thus, Sumo briefly told them everything about herself. The Lotus Ferryman, the vast Southern Abyss. Wang Yu nodded and didn't say much. Shin Ming pursed his lips and said, Sigh. With such a low realm, I'm like a deaf and blind person, unable to see anything. How boring. Sumo laughed and said, This lotus platform is enough for you to play around. However, you must not walk out of the lotus platform. There are too many things we don't know about the Southern Abyss Sea. We'd better be careful. Let's go look for Miss Morong first. Then we'll assess the situation before we decide on our next step. Wang Yu and Shin Ming both nodded. As she spoke, Sumo's mind moved. His lotus platform instantly expanded to 100 zhang in size, like a giant ship. In the Southern Abyss Sea, it could be considered a pure land. Wang Yu sat cross-legged and began to cultivate. Shin Ming was bored to death and actually chose to sleep. Sumo looked at the surrounding seawater and was also somewhat at a loss. She could only urge the lotus platform forward. The sea was endless. Soon, Sumo disappeared in the direction she was heading. Not long after they left, the Lotus Ferryman from before actually appeared in his original position. He looked at the direction where Sumo disappeared and gently waved his folding fan. He frowned and seemed to be deep in thought. At this moment, there was a slight fluctuation in the void beside him. Not long after, another figure actually appeared above the sea. He wore wooden clogs, a wooden ruler at his waist, and a wooden mask on his face. On the mask was a ferocious monster. It was the masked man who appeared in the Five Poisons world. As soon as the masked man appeared, the Lotus Ferryman hurriedly stood up from the small boat and then respectfully bowed to the masked man. Master, why are you here? The masked man's voice was somewhat hoarse. Why? I saw that your brows were slightly furrowed. Was that little Lotus Knight a little different? Yes. The Lotus Ferryman nodded. That little Lotus Knight seemed to be a Lotus soul. However, It wasn't a complete lotus soul. Disciple couldn't see through him, and in what? The masked cultivator asked with a smile. And he seemed to have Bai Shan's aura on him. The lotus ferryman said. Hee hee. The masked cultivator said, Nan Yuan, your feeling was right. He was indeed a lotus soul from the lower realm. The fact that he could become a lotus knight is indeed related to Bai Shan. Oh, the lotus ferryman was stunned. Could it be that Bai Shan has already begun to enlighten lotus knights? Lotus knights are not worth Bai Shan's enlightenment. However, that little lotus knight has some karma with Bai Shan, the masked cultivator said. Then Master came for him? The lotus ferryman asked. You can say so. The masked cultivator sighed lightly. A mere lotus soul is worth Master coming personally? The lotus ferryman was puzzled. If there's anything, Disciple can do it for you. There are some things that you guys can't do for me. The masked cultivator said. However, you are in charge of the Southern Abyss Sea, and the waters of this realm are all under your jurisdiction. You have to take care of that little lotus soul. He has just become a lotus knight. His lotus intent is still not stable. The Southern Abyss Sea is most suitable for people to complete their lotus intent. Lastly, there's no need for him to use the lotus leaves to go back. You personally sent him on a trip. Oh, Nan Yuan couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Master, you mean to let him ride on my boat? Hee, of course. The masked cultivator laughed. Why? Don't tell me you want him to ride on my boat. How can he be qualified to ride on Master's boat? Nan Yuan laughed. However, he doesn't seem to be qualified to ride on my boat now. Otherwise, why would I say that he's special? The masked cultivator sighed. Actually, he really is qualified to ride on my boat. Oh, Nan Yuan was stunned again. He has a boat ticket with him. The masked cultivator said. White Mountain boat ticket. Nan Yuan said in surprise. Master, you gave it to him? I don't even have a boat ticket. Why would I give him a boat ticket? The masked cultivator smiled bitterly. I'm just a boatman. I don't even have a boat ticket. Hee hee. The people on White Mountain gave him a boat ticket? Nan Yuan asked. Do you still need to ask? The masked cultivator said. The boat tickets are all in White Mountain's hands. Naturally, they were given by White Mountain's people. Nan Yuan couldn't help but take a deep breath. His eyes were filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred. It should be known that he had been in charge of the Southern Abyss Sea for countless years, but he had never gotten a boat ticket. He could only look at White Mountain from afar. At this moment, he somewhat understood what his master had said just now. The karma between the Lotus Soul and White Mountain was absolutely extraordinary. In this life, his name is Sumo. The masked cultivator said again, There are many things that you'll know in time. Don't worry, Master. Nan Yuan said that Sumo seems to have come to find a girl in white and the reflection of a cultivator. Previously, I didn't know his origin, so I didn't give him much guidance. Now, I'll immediately let him see that girl in white. The masked cultivator nodded. In short, you must let him complete the lotus intent. Disciple obeys. Nan Yuan bowed and said. When Nan Yuan raised his head, the masked cultivator had already disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1007. The sea was vast and boundless. Sumo controlled the lotus platform above the southern abyss and looked around. There was nothing on the surface of the sea. Sumo didn't know how long they had been walking. Wang Yu opened his eyes 3 times, and Shun Ming turned his body 7 or 8 times. Sumo stood on the lotus platform and didn't dare to relax, because he remembered the words of the lotus ferryman. Always pay attention to whether there was a black hole or a whirlpool. At this moment, Sumo's gaze moved slightly, because 300 miles ahead, Sumo saw a whirlpool. The surrounding seawater was all pouring into the black hole in a whirlpool. With a thought, Sumo raised the lotus platform by 12 feet to avoid being swept up by the waves. Originally, Sumo just wanted to go around the black hole. But when he approached the black hole, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes, because he suddenly saw a small island at the edge of the black hole. To be precise, it was an ice island. The ice island wasn't big, about 10 feet in circumference. If Sumo hadn't been paying attention, he wouldn't have found it all. In the vast southern abyss sea, it was like a speck of dust. This was the first time Sumo saw an island in the southern abyss sea. And the strangest thing was that there was a female cultivator lying on the island. That female cultivator was wearing a white dress, lying straight on the ice island. Miss Moreau? Sumo was slightly stunned. Soon after, with a thought, the lotus platform shrank and descended at the same time, suspending about 3 feet above the ice island. Miss Moreau, Sumo called out softly. However, Murong Haiching's eyes were slightly closed, as if she had fainted and didn't have any reaction. Her face was slightly pale, but there was nothing strange about it. Miss Moreau, Sumo called out twice again. However, Murong Haiching still didn't have any reaction. Sumo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Lady Yu, Lady Ming. Sumo turned around and called out to Wang Yu and Shun Ming. What's wrong? Wang Yu opened his eyes while Shun Ming stood up. I found Miss Murong. However, she seemed to have fainted. I'm going down the lotus platform to take a look. You two stay here and don't move. Sumo instructed. All right. Wang Yu and Shun Ming nodded. Sumo left the lotus platform and landed on the island of ice. He didn't feel anything when he was on the lotus platform. However, as soon as Sumo got out of the lotus throne, she felt that the whole Nanyuan Sea was as warm as spring, and the spiritual qi was abundant. He had only experienced such abundant spirit qi in the soul storage altar cave. However, as soon as he landed on the ice island, he felt a bone-piercing cold air, as if there were 2 seasons. Sumo was a lotus warrior. If she was in the venerable realm, the cold air would instantly turn into cold poison and seriously injure her. This was because it was the coldest yin qi in all the realms. At that moment, Sumo understood. This island of ice didn't originally exist in the Nanyuan Sea, but it was formed because of Murong Haiching. This was because the cold air on the island of ice was exactly the same as that of Murong Haiching. Miss Murong, Sumo bent over and tried to wake up Murong Haiching again. However, the result was the same as before. Sumo carefully scanned with her divine sense and found that Murong Haiching was like a corpse, because she didn't breathe or have a divine soul. Flesh? Sumo was stunned. At the same time, he pointed with one hand and a green light shot out from his fingertip. It was a lotus qi that entered Murong Haiching's glabella. Qi. However, as soon as it entered Murong Haiching's divine sense, it was bounced back by another lotus intent. Sumo frowned. There was a lotus intent in Murong Haiching's sea of consciousness. However, it was obvious that the lotus intent didn't belong to her. There was a lotus intent in Murong Haiching's body. This seemed to explain why she could find the Nanyuan Sea with her venerable realm cultivation. Sumo withdrew his lotus qi. He couldn't wake Murong Haiching up, so he tried to lift her onto the lotus throne. However, Sumo didn't expect that he couldn't move Murong Haiching's body even a little after using the lotus force twice. There seemed to be thousands of worlds hidden in Murong Haiching's body, and he couldn't lift it at all. At the same time, she seemed to be completely integrated with the island of ice under her. This island of ice was rooted in the Nanyuan Sea, and it seemed to be only a corner. Why was Murong Haiching's divine soul here? Where did her divine soul go? Sumo couldn't figure it out. So, Sumo turned his eyes to the black whirlpool not far away. At this time, the seawater around the island of ice poured into the black whirlpool. Sumo didn't know why there was such a black whirlpool in the Nanyuan Sea. Hua, hua. The sound of the waves was endless, and the seawater seemed to be gone forever. Sumo just glanced at the black hole, but suddenly he felt a bang in his sea of consciousness. It seemed that there was an unknown force directly exploding in his mind. Immediately, Sumo felt the world spinning. Not good. Sumo screamed in his heart, but it was too late. Sumo only felt that his body was suddenly swallowed by the black hole. In an instant, Sumo lost consciousness. And next to the black hole, where Sumo disappeared, Lotus Nanyuan appeared on the boat. On the island of ice, there was only Murong Haiching's body. Sumo's whole body plunged into the black hole. Nanyuan looked at the black hole and couldn't help but smile. Sumo, I hope you will gain something in the world of the black hole. Soon, you will see that Murong Haiqing. Hee. At the same time, he waved one hand, and Sumo's lotus platform was directly fixed on the island of ice. Time and space stopped. Wang Yu and Shen Ming on the lotus platform didn't feel anything at all. They didn't know that they were completely fixed in a special time and space. Whoosh! At this time, Sumo had regained consciousness. He felt like he was in an extremely deep and narrow black tunnel, but this tunnel went from top to bottom. He continued to fall. Boom! Crack! Suddenly, Sumo felt a light explode in front of his eyes. Then, everything suddenly became clear. In front of Sumo, an endless chain of mountains appeared. He had already landed on a mountain peak. Whoosh! Sumo instinctively looked up, because just now, he seemed to have fallen from the void. Then he saw with his own eyes that a black hole in the void was rapidly closing. Time and space teleportation. Sumo's heart jumped. But where was this place? So, Sumo looked up again. Pure white snow mountains stretched endlessly. The peaks were like swords, pointing straight to the sky. Everywhere he looked, there was actually endless snow plains. And extremely far away, there was an ice peak leading the mountains. It was so high that he couldn't see its peak, reaching straight into the clouds. In the wind and snow, the ice peak stood between heaven and earth, adding a bit of solemnity and mystery, like a pillar of the North Pole. At this moment, Sumo's expression couldn't help but change slightly. 3 realms, sacred mountain? He actually returned to the desolate ocean divine continent of the 3 realms. Chapter 1008. Desolate Ocean Continent, 3 Realms, Sacred Mountain. Sumo could not believe what he was seeing, because the 3 realms no longer existed. Back then, Sumo combined the 9 coffins and broke the karma roulette. From then on, the 3 realms no longer existed. The 3 realms' Sacred Mountain was already destroyed when Murong Huang used Lihin's body to awaken. The 3 realms had already become a thing of the past. How could it return? Sumo took a deep breath. In fact, he was wondering if this was some kind of strange illusion. However, no matter how much he focused and even activated his demon eye, nothing around him changed. Everything in front of him was probably not an illusion. It seemed like he had returned to the 3 realms through the dark tunnel, just like how he and Yi Wuhui had returned to the 3 realms of red dust millions of years ago through the immeasurable ship. At that thought, Sumo became excited. Perhaps in this world, he could still see those people in his memories. For example, Mr. One. Perhaps he could obtain their Tao shadows. Sumo recalled the black hole from before. Could Murong Haiqing have returned to the 3 realms as well? At that thought, Sumo did not hesitate any longer and headed straight for the 3 realms' sacred mountain. Sumo's cultivation was still there. However, he could not reach the 3 realms' sacred mountain in one step. He had to move 3 times before he reached the outside of the sacred mountain. The 3 realms' sacred mountain was as majestic as before. However, the strange thing was that Sumo did not sense any formations. At the same time, he stood on the opposite side of the ice mountain and did not see the metal chain formed by the oceanic white dragon. Between the 2 mountains, clouds billowed, and the metal chain was nowhere to be seen. Of course, with Sumo's current cultivation level, no matter what kind of restrictive spell formation there was, it wouldn't be able to stop him. He went up the 3 realms' sacred mountain like it was flat ground. At the opposite side of the sacred mountain, he paused for a moment before stepping onto the mountain. Although Sumo was not as familiar with the 3 realms' sacred mountain as the oceanic white dragon, he was not unfamiliar with it either. After all, the entire 3 realms was once in his heart. Moreover, Murong Huang had been lurking in Lihin's body for a long time. Arriving at the holy mountain, Sumo's spiritual consciousness once again carefully explored the place. However, the entire sacred mountain seemed to be empty. Sumo directly entered the cave, where Lihin's physical body was sealed. The furnishings in the cave abode were exactly the same as before, and there was even a heaven pond at the top. However, the heavenly pool was empty. Li Hen's physical body was nowhere to be found. Sumo frowned. What was going on? This was clearly the Three Realms Sacred Mountain, but why was there nothing here? Sumo turned around and left the Immortals' Cave. Then, she went to several other Immortals' Caves. However, all the caves were the same. He didn't see anyone or anything special. However, when Sumo turned to the back of the mountain, she suddenly found a line of words on a blue stone. Time flies, things remain the same, but people have changed. Judging from the color of the words, it didn't seem to have been written for a long time. Murong Haiqing's handwriting, because this handwriting was exactly the same as the handwriting in the cold jade tomb. From the looks of it, Murong Haiqing had already arrived here a step earlier, and the situation he encountered should be the same as Sumo. Murong Haiqing also didn't see anything, otherwise he wouldn't have written such words. This Three Realms Sacred Mountain was indeed the same, yet different from the one in the past. Time flies, things remain the same, but people have changed. These 4 words were indeed very appropriate. Sumo walked one round and didn't find anything else. Hence, she directly left the Three Realms Sacred Mountain. Murong Haiqing must still be in this world. This was what Sumo had predicted in her heart. Hence, after Sumo left the Sacred Mountain, he directly sat cross-legged in the void and then spread out his spiritual consciousness with all his might. Now, Sumo was already a Lotus warrior. His spiritual consciousness could completely cover the entire 3 realms: Desolate Ocean Divine Continent, Azura Demon Continent, Boundless Sky Continent. Theoretically, as long as he wanted to, he could see everything clearly. This was something he could do even when he was the Underworld Lord. Hence, it was even easier now. However, this time, Sumo encountered an obstacle. He couldn't tell why. It seemed like everything in this world was absorbing his spiritual consciousness. His spiritual consciousness could only scan a radius of 100,000 miles. It seemed that in this world, Sumo's ability was inexplicably limited. However, Sumo had encountered such a situation before. Hence, he didn't panic. He simply headed south, straight to the North Pole Immortal Ocean. However, when he reached the North Pole Immortal Ocean, Sumo didn't stop. Because the North Pole Immortal Ocean situation was exactly the same as the Three Realms Sacred Mountain. There didn't seem to be any cultivators in the entire cold plains. Soon, Sumo arrived at the old haunt of the Frigid North sect. The Tongtian, Tianzi, Wangnan, Setting Sun, and Northgard were all there, but there were still no cultivators. Sumo headed west. Because the western part of the barren north of the barren ocean divine continent used to be under the control of the barren heaven sect. The Murong dynasty used to be in the western part of the barren north. Apart from the Three Realms Sacred Mountain, that was a place Murong Haiqing might return to. After all, Murong Haiqing used to be the princess of the Murong dynasty. Also, Sumo wanted to see if there were any relics of the Taiwan sect. After all, both the Murong dynasty and the Barren Heaven sect were part of the Taiwan sect's power. He headed west. Finally, Sumo sensed that this world was no longer empty. Because when he arrived at the Murong dynasty's territory, he discovered cultivators and even mortals. This made Sumo quite happy. At the very least, this meant that this world wasn't truly empty and that there were living beings. However, Sumo only sensed their existence. He didn't actually walk around, because that wasn't the goal of Sumo's trip. The cultivators of the Murong dynasty were merely spirit realm cultivators of the Three Realms. Unless something related to the Taiwan sect appeared, Sumo didn't plan to stay any longer. Sumo was already a Lotus scholar. When he looked at the Murong dynasty again, it seemed like they were separated by countless worlds. It was really boring for an immortal to look at an ant. He didn't feel close to it. Instead, he felt more like a stranger. In fact, Sumo couldn't even remember which year the Murong dynasty existed. Because even if he looked at the entire Murong dynasty's lifespan, it would only be an instant for Sumo. He still didn't see Murong Haiqing. At this moment, Sumo landed in a valley. This was because he'd once walked through this valley with Mr. Wen. However, not long after he landed, he turned a corner and suddenly came face to face with a cultivator. The cultivator was dressed in green. He was dressed like a scholar. He looked to be around 40 years old. A long beard fluttered in front of his chest. Mister, Sumo couldn't help but be stunned. This was because the person who came face to face with him was none other than Muron. And the one Muron in front of her wasn't a one-armed person. Muron was originally strolling leisurely. He didn't pay attention to Sumo at all. Now that he heard Sumo call him Mister, he couldn't help but look to his left and right to make sure there was no one around. Then he smiled at Sumo and said, "Little brother, are you calling me? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."